Okay, great. So thank you guys so much for joining us and welcome to our AMCAS Bootcamp. So this is a workshop that we designed to help pre-med students navigate the medical school admissions process. For those of you who don't know us, we are dual degree docs. I'm Trisha, and I also have Dr. Atasha with us today. And our goal is to literally just make the admissions process much easier. We both went to undergrad together. We went to Harvard together. We graduated in 2013, and we both had similar experiences where we just felt discouraged, unsupported, didn't really know where to turn to for help. And looking back, we would have both benefited from a lot of mentorship. And this is a story of students across the country. And so we're trying to provide accessible ways for you guys to get the information that you need to become doctors. So a little bit more about me. I'm Trisha. I'm an MD MBA student right now. I'm in the Drew UCLA program. So I've been in Los Angeles for the past 7 years. If you're interested to learn more about like my medical school journey or life in LA, feel free to check out my blog, 3000milesblog.com. And for me, I just felt like as a pre-med, I literally came to school not knowing anything. I kind of just took what my friends took. Like my other pre-med friends were like, you're not taking this class. And I'd be like, okay, let me switch it and take it with y'all. I had no guidance. I took organic chemistry before I even took general chemistry. Like I took general chemistry my senior spring. Like that's how lack of guidance and mentorship I had. I was literally lost. I searched a lot on Google and, Reddit and Student Doctor Network. And I remember the one time I posted on one of these forums, they were like, haha, you're never going to get into medical school. And then there was an advisor at school that was like, oh, you should consider doing other things in healthcare. And it was really discouraging, but I'm glad that eventually I, found my people and friends who were supportive and people I could really rely on. And I learned to navigate this system for myself, but it would have been so much more easier if I had like a mentor or resources that just like the information is out there on the internet, but I just didn't even know where to look. And that's our goal, is to make things accessible, easy to understand, digestible, so you can focus on your studies and making yourself the best candidate and not like scrounging the internet for answers to questions on anonymous forums where people all right, so I'm gonna let Dr. Atasha introduce herself as well.
Hey guys, so my name is Atasha Jordan, or Dr. Atasha Jordan. I'm also an MBA, and you can just call me Dr. Atasha though. And I am currently a psychiatry resident in Philadelphia, and I went to medical school in Philly, also went to business school in Philly, both at UPenn. As Trisha said, we have known each other now for going on 11 years, which is kind of crazy because we met freshman year of college, 2009. And similarly, like going through the process of being pre-med, I'm the first in my family to have gone through med school, gone to college in the US at all. I came here from Barbados. My mom's side of the family is from Trinidad. So really just kind of figuring this whole thing out by myself. Similarly to Trisha, made a lot of mistakes along the way, whether it was like not knowing how to really lean into office hours and just going to take advantage of like the resources that we have at TAs and the professors. And then really thinking about the application itself, like I literally didn't know what I was doing. Like I kind of sort of knew the different parts of it, but I remember opening up the AMCAS application for the first time and being like, wait, why did no one tell me there were so many sections? And just having to figure that out alone was so daunting. So I think now what we really want to do with dual degree docs, especially with this AMCAS bootcamp, is to kind of help demystify the process of applying to med school, because it's honestly not that complicated, but if you've never done it before, then it's complicated. So because we have gone through the process, we know kind of the tips and tricks of how to do it successfully, how to stand out. We want to make sure that you understand all the nuances, honestly, about the application process. So I really hope that you guys came ready with your notebooks, like your pen, or if you're going to do it on your laptop, whichever. But this is going to be just jam-packed with all the information you need to know about how to just successfully get through the AMCAS bootcamp and get through the AMCAS application.
Yes. So some things that we ask of you guys is that you like mute your phones, put away Instagram, put away social media, and just give us like about an hour of your time. And I promise that it will be valuable information. And we're going to be trying to drop in tips and tricks and also just sharing our experiences along the way. Okay, so today's agenda. So we're going to start off by just kind of getting everyone on the same baseline. I know we have people here at different phases of their pre-med journey. Is there anyone, you guys could put it in the chat, anyone applying to medical school right now this cycle? Let me know. Feel free to also use the chat to ask questions. We're going to just do a quick baseline overview of the medical school timeline, and from there, we're going to actually deep dive into the AMCAS and then talking about the cost of applying to medical school, and then we'll have an open Q&A session. And by all means, if you have questions in between, drop them in the chat. I'll be able to see them. Dr. Atash will be able to see them, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go along as well.
Yep.
So, oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay, so today's objectives. So today we're going to learn 3 things, okay? These are the 3 core things that we're going to get out of this workshop today. Number 1, we're going to understand the medical school application timeline. Number 2, we're going to understand the different sections of the application, specifically the AMCAS application. And number 3, we're going to learn best practices for filling out a successful AMCAS application. So just to get everyone on the same level of footing, because I know we have people in different parts of their pre-med journey right now, there are 3 application services for medical school in the US actually. So we have the application AMCAS, which is what we're talking about today. That's for MD or allopathic medical school. Then we have the AACOMAS for DO students. For osteopathic medical schools, and then also Texas public medical schools have their own application portal as well. Today we're going to just be focusing right here on the AMCAS, but I will say while there are some differences across the 3 different application services, the tips and tricks that you learn today can easily translate to the other application services as well. So if you're applying to Texas and state in Texas, or if you're applying to DO schools as well, the information that you're going to get will be universal, but just keep in mind that we will be operating from the framework of AMCAS today. Okay, so let's dive in. So when do I apply to medical school? This is something that students always ask me, like, when should I apply? Should I apply as a junior? Should I apply as a senior? Should I do a post-bac? And I always tell people when you're ready. I don't know if many people know this. Majority of our followers and people that have been keeping in touch with us are actually college age and older. But if you have a younger sibling or people that you mentor, if anyone, just for your knowledge, you can actually apply directly to medical school from high school by doing a combined BS-MD program. They're few and far between, but they're growing in number. But today we're really going to focus on the process of applying as a college student or as a postgraduate. So if you apply as a college junior, that basically means that the June of your junior year, so basically complete junior year, and that June is when you'd submit your applications. You interview all throughout your senior year, so basically the fall and part of the winter of your senior year, and by senior spring, you find out where you're going to medical school, and that immediately after summer vacation, you start medical school. So people who apply as a junior do not take a gap year. Then it's the same process as a college senior, but instead of, since you're graduating, so you submit your applications in June, usually that's basically right around graduation time for most students at most universities. And then during your gap year, you're actually interviewing in the fall and winter in the same way, but you're not enrolled in school. And so many students tend to use this opportunity to do, boost their resume. It might be an opportunity to get another degree. I had a friend who went to the UK to study like something completely different from medicine and science. It's really up to you, and it really depends on what the purpose of your gap year is for. And then another option is to apply as a postgraduate, which means that you've already graduated. It's the same timeline. You still have that year off, but maybe you took 2 years in between after college, and then you decided to apply. All of these paths will lead you to get an MD, and one is not better or worse than another. A common question that I usually receive from students is, hey, I feel burnt out, or, I feel like my GPA is a little bit lower and I do want to take a gap year to boost it or to add to my extracurriculars, but my parents don't want me to. And I completely understand that. As a child of immigrants, my parents were like, we came to America for you to go to school and do well and finish, and we don't understand what this break is. Your job is to go to school and graduate. Why do you need a break? And it was really hard because I felt because I had a rough start my freshman year, I wanted my senior year grades to count. And that wouldn't happen if I had applied as a junior. I also just wanted extra time for the MCAT. And I honestly just wanted a break. I saw upperclassmen that were, flying all over the place for interviews while they were in school. And that just didn't seem like something that I really wanted to do, honestly. And so I chose to apply as a college senior. And so some advice that I give students especially when they're kind of getting pushback from family or parents about taking a gap year, I, sometimes encourage students to maybe consider applying as a senior. That was kind of compromise I made with my parents. I was like, look, throughout senior year, I'll work on my application and I will submit it basically at the same time that I graduate. So their fears of like, oh, she'll never get her application together and she's just gonna give up on her dreams. Like, so they kind of had a little bit of reassurance that my application was submitted by the time I graduated. Happy to talk more about gap years offline. Feel free to reach out to me via social media, or you guys can email us or anything. But we're gonna.
One thing I'll emphasize that Trisha said before is really thinking about the best time to apply is when you are ready. And I just really want to emphasize that because that is going to look different for every person. So if you are grinding out of the gate from freshman year, your grades are looking amazing and like you have that GPA that's above a 3. I mean, we want to get you as close to 4 as possible, but at the end of the day, like if it's above a 3, you have a chance. Like if you're ready and you are in a position where you think you can apply, then do it. But I think really just recognizing like if you need to wait, I also needed to wait. My freshman year grades weren't that great. I needed to make sure that my science GPA got pulled up. So I like backloaded, took a lot of science classes during senior year, really helped to get my grades up. And all of that was like helpful for me to also make sure that I wasn't burned out from college. Cause I think sometimes we forget that like being pre-med is a grind. Like we were there with you. It's a grind. And having a year off or multiple years off, whether that's to work, do volunteering projects, travel, med school is not going anywhere. Like you don't need to rush the process to get there. Get there when it's time for you to get there and you'll be ready to just like buckle down, put your head down in med school. So just want to emphasize that. And if you feel like you need to wait or that you need to do a postgraduate program, it's okay. Like, don't worry about what your friend is doing. Stay in your lane. And that's what we're here to help you with. Like wherever you're at, we want to help you to make sure that you get to med school based on what is right for you.
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so true. Just stay in your lane, put your head down. Okay, so moving on to the next. So let's talk a little bit about just the timeline for applying to medical school. And, some of you may already be familiar with this, but I just want to get us all on the same baseline really quick before we really deep dive into the AMCAS application. So applying to medical school has 2 different applications, a primary application and a secondary application. So, but before I jump into the applications, I want to touch on Casper because that is something that students have brought up time and time again. It's something that's relatively new, and it also came up a lot during our office hours that we held, I think like last week. So I just want to make sure I cover that. So Casper is an additional requirement that only certain medical schools allow. It's a company that essentially creates ethical scenarios, and they send a score report of how you navigate these virtual ethical scenarios to the medical schools. And it's supposed to like add a more like holistic component to your application. So it's not just about, MCAT GPA. The way Casper works is that there's 12 stations and you have 5 minutes per station. It takes about an hour. You get ethical scenarios and you kind of respond to them in real time on your computer from the comfort of your home. I would say if you are applying to medical school, especially if you're applying to medical school this cycle, double check to see if the schools you're applying to require Casper. Not every single medical school requires it. It is an additional fee. I believe it's like $30 and then $10 per school. So compared to the other costs that you'll face in this process, which we'll get to later, it's relatively like affordable, but it is still something that you have to do. Keep in mind too, when you're researching your schools, some schools just want Casper in before they make their final admissions decisions. Other schools, they want to have a Casper report by the time that you, submit your secondary, or by the time they're ready to give out secondaries. They won't give it to you without a Casper. So that's something for you guys to just, keep in mind. Okay, so then So let's now dive into the AMCAS. So this year, the AMCAS opened on May 4th, and then that's typically what happens from year to year. They open the application portal to give you time to start filling in information. And just like Dr. Tasha was saying, when she opened the AMCAS and she was like, what is this? That was me. I thought it was like you put your name, you submit your essays, you mail your letters of recommendation, and you're like, cool, I applied to medical school. No, these people have, it's like a bunch of multiple mini essays, and we're gonna go into all of the different essays and what's expected in each of them, because it's not just your personal statement. You got to write little mini essays for your extracurriculars, your most valuable experiences. If you choose to talk about like a disadvantaged status that you may have, those are all additional essays, and you're going to want to revise them, have people look over them. So it's not just get my personal statement and submit, which is why I always encourage students to take advantage of the fact that the application opens for a month and then you can submit. So that kind of gives you a month to start pre-populating some of your answers. Typically for a successful application, you want to submit as soon as possible. Does that mean that, you're screwed and you won't get into medical school if you don't submit it when it opens in 5 days? Absolutely not. But keep in mind that medical schools, many of them operate on what's called rolling admissions, which you guys are probably familiar with since you already navigated the college admissions process. So basically what happens is schools are able to after a certain date, they're able to start offering acceptances. But what happens is as their seats fill up, there's less and less space, which means that the competition for those seats increases. So if you're a student that is maybe borderline, or you had some academic difficulty, or maybe a lower MCAT score, or if there's something in your application that you feel like you're kind of like concerned about or whatever, like I would highly encourage you to definitely apply sooner than later, because the longer you wait, the more competitive it gets. So when you submit your AMCAS application, they don't take everything you say as face value, because you could be a liar. The AMCAS actually reconfigures a whole new AMCAS GPA, which I'll get into further on. And I know I keep saying that, but I promise we will get to all of these little details. They give you a new GPA, and then your application goes under what's called processing. And then after that, when they're processing your application, then they move you to verification, and then your application is complete. This year, medical schools actually are not able to see your applications before July 10th. And the reason is because it takes AMCAS several weeks to verify your transcripts, your grades, make sure everything is appropriate and up to date and exactly how it should be. But remember that you're not the only one applying to medical school, and these people are doing this manually. So keep in mind that the wait periods for verification can get as long as like a month to sometimes like even a month and a half that they can be behind. So what does that mean for you as a student? It means that if you apply in July, just because the medical schools can technically receive your applications July 10th, they're probably not getting your application till at least the end of July, the earliest. And the longer you wait, there's going to be like a peak period where it's like the longest wait, which is usually around like July to August. So it really is in your best advantage to submit earlier. As soon as you submit your applications and it gets verified by AMCAS, oh, and by the way, your letters of recommendation do not need to be in to have a verified application. Those can follow your application, but you want them to come in, relatively soon, because schools do want to see what your like recommenders have to say. After application is verified, you then enter what's called like your secondary applications. And that basically runs about from July to December. For secondary applications, schools have different policies on when they submit secondary applications, and also who they submit them to. Secondary applications are a way for schools to actually get to know you a little bit better. For schools that have a specific mission, they may ask things like, oh, why are you aligned with our mission to work with the underserved? Or why are you aligned with our mission to work in primary care? Or in 7 years, how do you want your medical school classmates to see you by graduation, and things like that. Or sometimes they just want demographics, like where are you from, what's your name, what's your contact information, and here's some space to explain if you had any bad grades. It's really up to the school to decide what they want for secondary applications. Secondary applications, you're going to want to sit and dwell and look at them, but I'm telling you now, give yourself 3 days tops. These are short, quick essays, and there is no need to be spending 1 to 2 to 3 weeks on them. If you genuinely think that you really want to have a lot of time every year on various forums like Reddit, Student Doctor Network, students actually will have a whole forum where they publish all the secondary questions for all the schools. It's not uncommon for students to pre-populate some of their answers. I didn't do that because I personally didn't want to do more work than necessary. So I did my secondaries kind of as they came in, but you'll find that a lot of the secondary questions are very similar. So you can also repurpose and reuse your secondary responses, which will also make that 3-day turnaround much, much faster. The reason why I say 3 days is because the sooner you submit your secondaries, the sooner your application is fully complete and these people can invite you to interview. And that leads us to the next portion, interview season. That's going to run from about September to April. I know right now with COVID-19, virtual interviews and your opportunity to travel and visit schools are going to be limited, but that's okay. They'll be held online, if they need to be, and it'll be fine. I'm kind of navigating the same thing with residency applications right now. And just be reassured that everybody else is going through the same exact thing that you're going through, and no one has like a leg up over the other in regards to that situation. During interview season, the earliest you can hear back from medical schools is usually around October 15th. It's usually like a mid-October date. And that's when schools can start giving you an acceptance. So now imagine you applied early in June, you did a 3-day turnaround for your secondaries, you had an interview in September, and bam, October, you found out you have an acceptance. It doesn't happen this way for everyone, but if it happens this way for you, it's beneficial in multiple ways. One, if it's a school that you want to go to, I'm not saying to like drop all the other schools, but maybe withdraw your applications from the schools that you're less interested in, or maybe, a safety school that you didn't really want to go to, but you were applying as a backup. This is a way to save money, especially if you're going to be traveling and flying to all these interviews. The sooner you get an acceptance, the sooner you can start canceling interviews. I would have loved to go to my Tulane interview. It was actually during Mardi Gras weekend, and I was like, oh my God, I've never been to Mardi Gras, until I looked at flight prices to get to New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and I was like, that's cute. I already have some schools that I know that I really like, and they were actually higher up on my list than Tulane. So thank you, but no thank you, Tulane. I'm actually going to have to give you a pass because nobody's paying $1,000 right now for some last minute flights for Mardi Gras weekend just to do this interview. So there are some advantages to getting accepted early. Another thing that I want to quickly just touch on is the early decision program. So historically, early decision deadlines are August 1st, and you are only allowed to apply to one school. With traditional deadlines, you find out by October 1st. It usually is October 1st if you're accepted to your early decision school. If you are accepted, you must go. By doing early decision, you basically are saying, this is the only school I want to go to, please take me, and if you take me, I will say yes. If you don't get accepted through early decision, or they reroute you, sometimes they push you to the regular application cycle. They're like, we won't accept you for early decision, but we're still going to hold on to your application. We may call you back later. At that point, you're now free to submit your applications and apply to other schools. So that's just something I know some students like have one school, like for whatever reason, it might be the one school they're setting their sights on, whether it's, you need to be close to family or it's just a dream school. Just keep in mind that if you are committing to early decision, that you really can't work on any other applications, including DO applications, including the Texas applications. You'd technically be violating the rules of what you consented to when you checked off the box for the early decision application. Also, so by the time you get to spring, that's when you probably are hopefully sitting on multiple acceptances. And I just want to kind of briefly go over just a timeline about what your rights are and what medical schools actually have access to seeing after like February as we head into the spring. So historically, students have sat on multiple acceptances, like they'll have multiple acceptances. They know they're going to go to one, but whatever it is for their egos, or maybe they're scared or whatever it is, they don't want to drop the other acceptances. And this just makes a negative experience for everybody else, because maybe there's that one person that's on the wait list that's just hoping that someone will give up their spot. And you're sitting here with 6 acceptances like, hey, I got into all the med schools I wanted. And it's like, okay, great, but you can only go to one. So let it go so other people can have an opportunity. So by February 19th in the AMCAS portal, you can select something that's called plan to enroll. It doesn't mean that you must enroll, but it's just a way for you to indicate that that's your medical school, that's your top choice. Medical schools can't actually see who's saying, like, can't see who the people are, but by doing this, it gives them a number of, they can kind of approximate how full their class is going to be, and that can help them do better projections for how much more space do they have to admit. Because the worst case is, you know, they admit too many students that say yes and there's not enough seats for them. By April 15th, you're asked to now narrow down your acceptance offers to just 3. So if you are super fortunate, which I hope all of you are, to have multiple acceptances, I hope that you guys on April 15th, you have this dilemma to make, that you have to narrow it down to 3 choices. You're still allowed to stay on wait lists, and medical schools are still able to, like, pull you on and off of wait lists. From there, on April 30th, that's when you have to decide to actually commit to enroll. When you make your final selection and commit to enroll, it is your responsibility to actually reach out and communicate with the other programs that you were either on wait list for, or maybe programs that you were already accepted to that you're turning down. It's your responsibility to speak to them. I will say, do not ghost these programs. Do not be rude and disrespectful. If you are trying to leverage different financial aid packages, maybe by this point, you already have scholarship or financial aid information, just be very gracious with how you handle this. Remember, you're not only representing yourself, but you are representing your alma mater. You are representing perhaps the post-bac program that you came from, and you do not want to tarnish the reputation of your school with these programs, because you do not want to ruin it for everyone else that came after you. And people talk, and medicine is a very small world, and you just don't want to be that person.
I think the other thing to think about as well is these programs, even though you might not choose them for medical school, you still have residency, you still have fellowship, you still have attending jobs. So really trying to make sure that you do not burn bridges in this process, because just as Trisha said, people talk, and if you like did something super egregious, they will talk about you and you will go on somebody's list of we don't want them here ever. And you do not want that for yourself.
No, you do not. And my apologies, plugging in my laptop. All right, great. And then around October, after all the students have already started school, that's when medical schools can see where applicants in their pool actually ended up going. And that's just for them to be able to see, like, oh, like, who's our competition this year? Like, why are all our students like going to XYZ school? Like, is it because they were offering better financial aid? Do they have better, I don't know, diversity initiatives? Are they nicer? Like, who knows? So that's kind of just the timelines of how to navigate that process. And I'm just going to check the chat real quick.
I've been answering questions, but the most recent one you can answer, or well, not the one from France about how to let people know.
Yeah, so do we have to email the schools personally and turn down the acceptance, or does AMCAS alert them? So AMCAS actually does not alert them. It is your responsibility to withdraw your applications from the other medical schools. Something as simple as an email that just says, like, some schools actually have application portals, so they might actually give you a login, like username and things, where you schedule your you schedule your interview, and they might have an option for you to check, like, I am turning down this offer. Most schools, what I did was I just actually ended up emailing them. You usually end up having a point of contact with the admissions office. Just send a gracious email like, dear XYZ Medical School, thank you so much for consideration. At this time, I think I've decided to go with another school, but I genuinely appreciate, like, your faculty and staff, like, taking the time to interview me. It was a very rewarding experience. And I thank you so much for considering me as an applicant. Done. Send. That's all you need to do. Just don't go schools, and don't be rude when you send it. Like, y'all thought I was going to go to your school. No, none of that. Don't do that. Okay. So now we're going to deep dive into, I see some questions. Okay, so Tasha's handling the chat, which is great. So now we're gonna go into some of the AMCAS sections. The first section that we're gonna discuss is the main section, which is the identifying information. This is relatively simple. It's just your name, your IDs, birthday, birth location. Key tip, make sure you have all your ID numbers linked to your AMCAS account, okay? This is especially true if you were a transfer student, if you did study abroad, if you did a post-bac, if you took one-off courses, maybe you took college courses in high school. Yes, that will count. I'll get to that in a little bit when we get to the coursework section. You want all those ID numbers linked with your AMCAS, and they just have a space for you to list them because you want all of your documentation to be identifiable. You're gonna have transcripts and letters of recommendations and things coming in from all over the place, and you want to make sure that if anything gets lost, if your name gets removed from anything, that they have a way of bringing your file back to, like, connecting it back to you as an applicant. The next section of the AMCAS is the schools attended section. So this is where you talk about high school. This is where you talk about, you kind of just list your high school, any high schools you attended. This is where you submit your college transcripts. You talk about if you've ever had any previous matriculation at any medical schools before, if you've ever faced institutional action. Something to keep in mind is that do not forget to input study abroad information. Study abroad is a very unique situation when it comes to transcripts. If you studied abroad and you're going to need to get a foreign transcript from a foreign institution or university, get on that sooner than later, especially if it's a place you don't speak the language. Like, do you know how hard it is to get navigate with time zone differences, language barriers, to try to get like a transcript from Germany or wherever you might have studied abroad? So make sure you get those early because you cannot have a verified application without transcripts. So AMCAS kind of identifies 4 different study abroad methods. So you can either, I know some people do study abroad that's sponsored by their local, like by their home institution. Some schools offer a study abroad program that usually has like a faculty sponsor, and it's usually one of those programs where it's like, I remember in undergrad we had one, it was like Italy, and they did like Rome, Milan, like they did it was like an art and architecture or something, and they did various locations, and so as a result they actually had multiple school affiliations. It wasn't like they were just at one university. There's also study abroad programs that are sponsored by third-party organizations, and then also American colleges that are overseas also exist as well. So if any of these situations apply to you, I would highly recommend that you check out, and the link is going to be at the bottom of this at the end of this presentation, the actual AMCAS guide for applicants, because they actually have very specific instructions. Like, if you did this kind of study abroad, upload your transcript here, check off this box there, and you don't want to mess that up because you don't want your application to get sent back to you and you have even more delays to be verified. Another thing, like I said, send your transcripts early using the transcripts request form. AMCAS will have a special cover letter that's supposed to accompany your transcripts. Keep in mind, I know right now UCLA is backed up by 2 weeks for transcripts. If your school offers certified official transcripts via electronic delivery, AMCAS does accept those if it's coming directly from the institution or the company that your school uses to issue transcripts. So that might be your best bet if you want to avoid some of the slow processing times, because, you know, during these times there's limited people in the office. Okay, and yes, Alfred, it does include graduate school work, so keep that in mind. And yes, e-transcript is so fast. If your school offers it, I highly recommend you take advantage of it. There usually is a spot where you can the transcript has to have the AMCAS transcript cover letter, because that has a specific barcode, and that's how they keep your transcript intact and attached with your application. So there's probably going to be a section that it will say, like, you can upload additional documents or something like that, and you can add that to be sent wherever they send your transcripts. Okay, the next section that I want to talk about is biographic information. So this is the 3rd section of the AMCAS. And on this section, you put your address, your citizenship, legal residence, how you self-identify, any languages you speak. Don't forget to put English, childhood info, which we'll get into, whether or not you did military service, felonies and misdemeanors, disadvantaged status, which we'll also get into in just a second, as well as information about your parents, any guardians you may have, siblings or dependents. I will say, I know everyone has very unique situations. If you have, non-custodial parents, or if you have unique family situations, if there's something like I've worked with students that have like very, very, very unique situations. The AMCAS, once again, the guidebook that I will link to, they provide basically every one of these sections. They provide a little bit of counsel of how to, figure out or what to check off or whatnot. So that is going to be like a good reference for you guys to have on the side while you're kind of filling out all these parts. Something that I do want to mention is that that guide actually does have a section on felonies and misdemeanors. If you are in the position where you have a felony or misdemeanor, it's not the end all be all, but know your rights. In the AMCAS guidebook, it lists by state what the different guidelines are by state. Certain states have protections where you actually aren't required to report certain things if it happened before a certain age, or certain types of violations don't necessarily count. And so if you do have a felony or misdemeanor on your account, I would recommend that, once again, that you check the AMCAS guidebook and check that section, so that way you can kind of just see, like, just to make sure that you're appropriately reporting. Because the worst thing that you would want to happen is that you think you don't have to disclose and you don't, and then a medical school finds out that you have something on your record, and that's enough for them to kick you out, and everything that you've worked hard for has just gone down the drain. And anyway, so sticking with the biographic information, I want to now move on into the childhood info and the disadvantaged status section. This is a section that I feel like gets a lot of questions because students sometimes feel like they have an advantage for some reason when they fill out these disadvantaged status essays, or if they identify as lower income, and that is far from the truth. First and foremost, you are only hurting yourself if you lie or use these sections to make excuses. So don't do that. Don't try to play the system. If those sections apply to you, the disadvantaged section, which we're going to get into in just a second, then yes, fill it out. If it doesn't, it's okay. Leave it blank and move on. For the childhood info, these are some of the questions that they ask you. They want to know if the area that you grew up in, do you think it was medically underserved? What was the income level of your family? Did any of your family members or you use federal or state assistance? Did you work before age 18? Were you required to contribute to the family income as opposed to just keeping your money for yourself? Did you ever receive a Pell Grant? And how did you pay for post-secondary education? The reason why they're asking these questions, it does feel kind of invasive and it's a little nosy, but the reason why is they're trying to get a better holistic understanding of who you are as an applicant. We all know, and this is something that we talked about during office hours, that, we unfortunately, like, our education system is not equitable. And, certain people that there are people that didn't have access to the best public schools, or maybe, their parents, they're first generation college students, and that actually plays a large factor into, who they are as an applicant. And schools want to know, because that could possibly explain maybe some discrepancies on your transcript, or it might explain certain things about your application, but not necessarily. The next area in the biographic information is the disadvantaged status. So if you feel that you are disadvantaged, it is usually if you grew up in an area that was medically underserved, or if you and your family had insufficient access to social, economic, and educational opportunities. Now, it is up to you. Students always ask me, does this count as disadvantage? If you have to ask sometimes if you count as disadvantaged, like, you would know if you had something in your life that has held you back. I have, worked with students that I had a student that was in a religious cult that did not believe that she was allowed to get an education, and she had to escape and essentially pursue her GED on her own. Started college with like very minimal high school background, because it was something like education was not pushed on her as a child intentionally because she was a woman. That's insufficient access to education. It doesn't have to be that severe, but maybe, you grew up in a single family household and you didn't have time to participate in extracurricular activities because you had to care for your younger sibling, or you had to care for a family member. There's so many different ways. My only advice to you is, if you fill out this section, do not make excuses. No one wants to hear like, oh, well, I got bad grades because my family doesn't make a lot of money and it's not our fault, and I couldn't afford an MCAT class, which is why I didn't do better, but if I was rich, I'd be able to afford it. Like, no, do not make excuses. You want to explain your situation, but in a way that shows that you are exhibiting, you know, in a way that you just want to objectively share your information. You don't want to try to make excuses for things. Also, just to point out, AMCAS actually, regardless if you fill out this disadvantaged status or not, they actually automatically label you as if they think that you would qualify to be disadvantaged. So if you do not, so this is one of the indicators, and it looks at your parents' education and your parent or guardian occupation. Because remember, in the biographic information, you had to put information about your family. So as you can see, if your parents don't work in if your parents don't work in like a professional or executive or managerial position, and they're kind of more doing like service or skilled or unskilled labor, then you probably will count as disadvantaged. You also count, or if you get a disadvantage indicator. You also get this indicator if your parents have less than a bachelor's degree. Additionally, you can be like flagged in the system with a disadvantage indicator if your parents did not complete college, or if they don't have a college degree or left college or have less than a high school education. So just keep that in mind. So if you are, you know, if your parents are here and they have a doctorate and professional degree, so you're not first gen, and then on top of that, they have a, you know, they have an executive managerial, like some sort of professional career, and you're out here filling out this disadvantaged status when the AMCAS automatically said you were not disadvantaged, you better have a really good explanation. And this is why I tell students, like, don't force it. If this doesn't apply to you, then leave it alone, because you will do more harm than good by trying to fake a story. Once again, if you do have circumstances that are, you know, genuine and you want to report, by all means report them, and it shouldn't be held against you.
Yeah, and I think too, like, don't feel like you have to force to fit into like the disadvantage indicator status, because at the end of the day, the reason that exists is not to stereotype or to like separate out applicants, but it really is to help the admissions committee really have a better understanding of the experiences that you have gone through that have brought you to the point of where you're at. So if you have had challenges to face, and now, like, let's say your MCAT score isn't as high or your GPA isn't as high, the disadvantage status is there to help kind of maybe give an understanding and a more thorough background as to why this might be the case for you. But at the same time, like, don't lean on it as a crutch either, I think is like the main point that we want to get across. Like, you want to be a strong applicant regardless, but if you have real troubles and like issues that you had to overcome as a pre-medical student, or even in high school or earlier, like, you want to talk about it, but don't think that you have to have something like that to be able to stand out as an applicant.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I saw recently on Twitter, if you guys follow me on Twitter, I actually responded, like, someone made a comment that as someone who, this person was like, grew up in a very low income household. And, you know, she was like, I feel like graduates in like the world of graduate admissions and medical school, like, it's cool to be poor. Like, people are like trying to create sob stories and trying to be like, I have no money and stuff. And it's like, all right, like, there's a difference between I'm in college and, you know, it's a struggle because financial aid, you can only takes you so far. And like, I literally have no emotional, financial, any type of support from like my community back home or something like that. All right, let's move on to the coursework. So in AMCAS, you are actually required to put your own coursework into the application. And for a lot of students, including myself, this was very, very stressful because you have to actually identify your courses. And there's so many categories in which you can choose from. And I think what gets tricky is when you have courses that you want to count towards your science GPA and they're not technically in a science department. So myself, I was technically a psych major, but I actually focused on social and cognitive neuroscience. I don't have a degree in neuroscience because Harvard didn't have a neuroscience department. So all of their neuroscience stuff was done under psych, even though I basically did all neuroscience for undergrad. So as a result of that, my courses, even though they're listed as like psychology 102 or psychology 405, they were still able to be counted as science because the general the general course topics were science-based. So that's something that students always ask me, like, hey, I took this elective in this department, but it was actually like a medical anthropology class, but it was actually really about like biological basis of diseases, but like, but I got an A and I really need to boost my science GPA. Like, if you can provide supporting documentation that this will count, then by all means, have it count towards your science GPA. What you don't want to do is lie, kind of stretch it to truth and be like, well, for 2 weeks, we kind of talked about genetics in this like random science-ish class, so I'm just going to put it and see what they do. No, what they're going to do is they're going to send your application back to you and you're going to be mad that it gets delayed even further. So the AMCAS people, they've been doing it for years. They're not new to this. They know, some people really do try to swindle them, which I don't understand why, because you will get caught. But by all means, if you have a course that is primarily science and math content, but it's not listed as a science class, you are eligible to list it as such. You just make sure, if someone comes knocking on your door, they're going to want to see a copy of the syllabus or some sort of proof that what you said is actually true. Do math courses count as science courses as well? They're classified as math, but they are included in your science GPA, which we'll get to in just a second. Okay. Okay, so someone has a question about heavily clinical rotations and bioethics courses. Does it count as science or just a health science course? It really depends on the nature of the course. I took a medical ethics class, and while we talked a lot about medicine and all this stuff, it was fluffy. So by no means was it a science course. But, we had a class in undergrad that, what was it, science of cooking? It was like a gen ed class, and basically you got to go into like these kitchens and you got to make food and everyone thought it was fun, but the whole class was about like chemical reactions and how you get the perfect steak is actually like when you're searing the steak, the molecules are caramelizing. And so it was actually like the chemistry of food. And most people were swindled because they thought it was going to be an easy But that class does count technically as a science course, and people did use it as part of their CPA. So it really, you have to look back at your syllabus and look at the actual content of the course to say, is this truly science-based? Something else that I want to talk about is repeating coursework. So if you had a situation where you had to repeat courses, AMCAS wants to see all of the grades. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of a caveat. So AMCAS says you're supposed to put every single grade you have ever received, even if your institution wipes it from your transcript. I will tell you, speak with the counselors at your school if you were in that situation, because every school kind of has their own way a little bit, like, of navigating the admissions process. Like, they kind of know schools that favor their applicants. Most schools kind of, even if they don't publish it, they have a list of like, what are some programs that students with lower GPAs from our school typically get accepted to. And they keep those internally because it's helpful for them when they're giving counseling, and it's not something that they publish. But, if you are in a situation where you have repeated coursework and maybe it doesn't show up on your transcript and you're debating, like, do I put it, do I not? I would go back to that institution and just ask them, like, what does the stereotypical pre-med from your institution do? And they will be able to give you specific guidance on how to navigate that. Keep in mind that if AMCAS does change one of your courses, say you took a class and AMCAS is like, nah, like that medical ethics class is English, sorry. And you're like, no, that was some hard science in there. You are able to file a petition. With that being said, make sure that when you file a petition, if you're changing course classifications, that could potentially affect your AMCAS GPA. Because if you're having courses bounce back between counting as science and math or not counting as science and math, then that means it could just make sure that they recalculate your GPA to reflect those changes. And avoid delays with your application. Be as accurate as possible. This is the one section where there's actually a worksheet, which once again, it's going to be in the PDF that I'm going to link at the end. There's actually a link in that document that links to, it's like a chart, exactly how to calculate your hours, how to do it if you're on a semester versus a trimester versus a quarter system, how to do your units and credit. So just make sure that you double and triple check that section, because this is the area in which most students get their applications returned to them and denied verification. It's because they did not appropriately input their grades and their coursework. Okay, so for those of you that were having questions about GPA, so this is kind of an example of what it would look like from a medical school perspective of when they're looking at your GPA. So as you can see, it's organized by your year. And the reason why high school is included is because if you took community college classes in high school, I know New York State, we had a partnership with Syracuse University. So technically, like all my high school history classes counted as, college credit. And you best believe I put that on there. I was like, A plus, A plus, A plus. Yes, help, GPA, help. I mean, of course, medical schools are going to see that you had a lot of 4.0s that maybe came from college or, came from other things, like, because they clearly can see the breakdown, but it still gives me a boost to my cumulative undergraduate GPA, as you can see right here. So the way schools break down your GPA is you have your science and math GPA, also known as BCPM, but I'm just going to call it science and math. And then you have your all other GPA, and then you have your totals. So they see basically on the first two column, or the first GPA column, that's just the science and math GPA separately, all the science and all the math classes. Then the next GPA column underneath the AO is going to be your GPA of courses that were not classified as science and math. And then afterwards, they do a total GPA, which is basically, the total, your overall GPA for that year. High school, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, as well as undergraduate level post-bac work will all count towards your undergraduate GPA. So sometimes students ask me, oh my gosh, I want to do a post-bac to boost my grade. Should I do a master's or should I do like this post-bac program? And I always tell students, think about what your goal is for the post-bac. If you really, really, really have a below average GPA and you really need to boost it to get through some of these screeners that schools provide on the secondaries, it may be in your best interest to do a undergraduate level post-bac program or take undergraduate level courses during your gap year so you can boost that cumulative undergraduate GPA. Some students are also of the mindset of, oh, I rather take master's levels courses because I think they're harder, and I think it'll show that I can actually handle the rigor of graduate level science coursework. That's another, there's people who are successful doing both, but something I tell students to think about all the time is if you have to make that decision, is think about how much of a boost do you really need for your undergrad GPA. Let's see if is there any questions or anything? I just want to check in. How are we doing?
I've been answering the questions. I think, Jamie, I just put in a response. If you want to just clarify your question a little bit about the grade input and what you mean by sensitivity, that'll help. But otherwise, I think we're up to date on answering questions.
How sensitive is grade input? Jamie, yes. Can you clarify what you meant by sensitivity? And then I'm happy to answer that. Screeners for GPA. Okay, so this is a controversial topic in the medical world because, I know, I'll be upfront, UCLA has been talking about, and I've been in my master's, so I'm not sure exactly what they decided on, but it caused an uproar. They want to have a hard, fast cutoff for GPA and MCAT at UCLA. And also, is there a way to know who screens? Historically, schools don't reveal how they do their process. It's all proprietary information. They don't want you to know because that's how you game the system. Some schools are a little bit forthcoming. Every once in a while, like on the AMC website, they'll have quotes from admissions directors, or sometimes schools will even admit that they do holistic review, or some schools will actually, I think USC, they literally read every single application, whether or not you get a secondary. They have a human looking at every single application. So it really depends. Some schools are very forward about it. Some schools aren't. What I like to say is when you look on the school's website under the admissions, if a school says that they use a very holistic process of assessing your candidacy, that usually means that there probably is some sort of like non-computer, non-algorithmic way of screening out students. Schools, honestly, if they do have cutoffs, they usually don't reveal them. Schools that don't screen, those are the schools that historically everybody gets a secondary. So if you are, there's certain schools that you'll like go online, if you even look at these forums. FYI, I don't support these online forums, but I know people are going to use them anyways. So when I bring them up, I'm not telling you to make a student doctor account. I actually think you should do the opposite. But if you're going to look for information on the internet, at least be targeted with what you're looking for. And so oftentimes when you on student doctor, people will start posting when they get secondaries. And if you see people with extremely below average stats, chances are, it's a school that does not screen before giving a secondary. And some people say that some schools do that because they're making money off of you for every secondary. Some schools genuinely want to give want to give every single person a chance. But I will say for screeners, you want to try to shoot for a 500 plus on your MCAT. You want to shoot for above a 3.0 for your cumulative and science GPAs. That doesn't guarantee you an acceptance, but that's usually anything below that is usually a lot of schools will like start to like kind of weed out students that fall below those
And I think one other thing to think about, and we did mention this at the office hours last weekend, is remembering to use the MSTAR resource to really figure out the range that schools have. So you can actually kind of like back into figuring out what their cutoffs are in a way, where if you find like the MSTAR, the application you can find on like the AAMC website, but if you figure out what their average is, but then look at the 10th percentile up to the 90th percentile of what they accept, when you're looking at about that 10th percentile, that is going to roughly be about what the cutoff is.
Exactly.
Meaning that it's not necessarily like that they're going to not take someone underneath that, but based on statistics, only 10% of people ever have had GPAs lower than that number. So that's like a really good way to figure out, like, with a school, like, do you even have a shot? Like that's the way I really thought about my application process. I was like, am I close to or above that 10th percentile? And this was specifically for like my reach schools, and figuring out as long as I was like close to that 10th percentile or higher, then that to me felt like, okay, I can confidently apply to this school because they will at least consider me. Doesn't mean I'll get accepted, but they will at least consider me. So that's the way I would encourage you to try to like back into figuring out a school's screening criteria.
Yes. Thank you for that, Tasha. That is very helpful. I think a lot of people really just focus on these averages, but what I tell people all the time, y'all should have taken statistics. The law of averages isn't always the most accurate reflection of what the actual data looks like. All right, so let's move on to the next section, work and activities. So this is like the fun part because it's like you get to reflect on your life and you're like, oh my God, I did all these things. For some people, it might not be the fun part because they're like, wow, I really did not get involved in college. So, I mean, for me, I enjoyed this section because I always had the mindset of do what I love. Don't do something just to put it on my resume, do what I love. And so all of my experiences throughout undergrad, paid, unpaid, were just things that even my part-time job, like I loved working in the IT department. I loved my friends there. It was like the best job on campus. I was so sad I had to quit when I had anatomy. Like when you do things that you are passionate about and you genuinely love, it comes off in your interviews. It comes off when you talk about it. I remember people used to always tell me, like, why do you focus so much on cheerleading? I was a competitive cheerleader. I did competitive gymnastics. And they're like, cheerleaders are ditzy and dumb. I can tell you every interview I have had, cheerleading always comes up and people are actually usually more impressed than like, wow, she's a dumb cheerleader. They're like, wow, I had no idea that this is such a rigorous sport. Like you spent 40 plus hours doing this and committed like it. And I get passionate about it because it was something that I loved. And that really reflects through your writing and through your interviews. So about your activities, you can document up to 15 activities and experiences for your activity sections. Now, don't get stressed, because I know the first thing someone's going to say is, oh my gosh, I did not do 15 activities. I get into medical school. That is not the truth. They give you up to 15 activities, but it is quality over quantity. You do not need to fill out all 15 slots. So in those 15 activities, you only have 700 characters. But remember when I told you the AMCAS is filled with like a lot of mini essays? This is an example of them. Like, say you have 5 activities, it may seem like 700 characters and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna write this in 2 seconds. No, I like mulled over these 700 characters. Like, they were agonizing. As much as I love like talking about the experiences that I had, it's not a lot of space, and you want to have the most impactful response for these sections. And the next slide, we're going to talk more about how you can do that. But basically, the key things that you need to have for your activities are the experience type, the experience name, the dates, total hours, and then you're also going to need a supervisor or some sort of contact as a reference. I have never heard of a medical school or AMCAS calling to verify an experience. But with that being said, I also have relatively normal friends that don't do wild things. I am sure if you were to put, you shadowed for 10,000 hours, or maybe you stretch the truth about something you did and someone on the admissions committee is familiar with that program and they're like, that's funny that she said she did all those hours at the homeless shelter, because I run that homeless shelter and I have never seen her before. You know what I mean? So those are the types of things that would kind of prompt people to investigate your experiences. So just be truthful, as always. And in addition to having 700 characters for up to 15 activities and experiences, you're able to select up to 3 experiences where you can write a lot more. And this is your most valuable experiences section, where you have about 1,300 characters, the same amount as a disadvantage essay, where you can go in depth about up to 3 experiences that were the most valuable to your career. People always ask me, what do I pick for most valuable? Pick ones that really resonated with you, something that you learned from, something that can show insight as to you as a person, an experience that you can talk about, that, you can show desirable traits and qualities that a medical school admissions committee is looking for. One tip that I also have is sometimes students tend to use their personal statement. They just try to throw everything in there, and they're like, oh, and like the whole theme of their personal statement might be about their global health, but they can't help but talk about at the end, just randomly throw in that they were like a tutor or something. And it's like, I get it, you're proud of that experience, but it doesn't flow in the essay. So sometimes I tell students, if there's important things that you feel like are just not working in your personal statement, but you still are so proud of those opportunities and you want that to shine, your most valuable experiences section may actually be a great place to put it. I actually kind of encourage people not to talk about the same exact thing that they talked about in the personal statement, because like, they're going to read your personal statement. This is an opportunity for these people to get to know even more about you, who you are as a person, what motivates you, what fuels you, what character traits you have, what leadership skills have you developed, what soft skills have you developed. So I would encourage you actually to not talk about the same things that you talk about in your personal statement, unless perhaps there's something extra above and beyond about whatever experience you mentioned in your personal statement that you didn't mention there that you still want to touch on here. And these are the experience types. So artistic endeavors, community service and volunteering, medical and non-medical, conferences attended, extracurriculars, hobbies, honors awards, intercollegiate athletics, just general leadership that doesn't fit into any of these categories, military service. There's other, if there's something that you want to, put, like, I don't know, maybe you were a member of the clergy, or maybe there's something religious that you feel like doesn't really fit into any of these. Paid employment for both medical clinical and not medical clinical, physician shadowing, presentations, posters, publications, research, and lab, as well as teaching and like tutoring and teaching assistant. So these are all the categories. Remember, there's only 15 slots. There are 18 categories, which further reinforces that you do not need every single one of these. There's not even enough space on the application for you to put every single one of these on your AMCAS application. The ones that I have in bold, though, I highlight because when people are asking me like, oh, I have grade, I think my grades are pretty good. I think I'm about to take the MCAT, but I'm not really sure about my extracurriculars. Am I ready to apply based off of my extracurriculars? Take a look at this list. What you really need to have, like core things that you should be looking for, are volunteering experience, some sort of clinical shadowing experience, and then if you can, research experience, because medical schools do look favorably upon some research or lab experience. If you don't have research, it's not the end all be all, but having volunteer experience, you're dedicating your life to serve people and help them with healthcare. You should have something community service on your resume, okay? You're signing up for literally the next 10 years of your life. You're gonna be training and dedicating your life to becoming a physician. You need to show these people that you know what you're getting into. So whether that's having physician shadowing, I know for myself, I didn't really do that much shadowing, but I did a lot of global health work in Haiti. And I kind of counted that as like community service, not medical clinical. I also worked as a scribe, so that counted as the paid employment medical clinical. So even though I was lacking a little bit in the shadowing hours, working full-time in a super busy like level 1 trauma center emergency room was all the medical clinical experience I needed, to be completely honest. When it comes to research, sometimes people are like, I don't like chemicals, I don't like mice. You don't gotta do bench work. I hate mice. I did lab research with mice once and I said, never again. You couldn't pay me $1 million to do that work. I hated it. I hate rodents, like absolutely not. But there's other types of research. I know people who are economics majors and they did economics research. They did psychology research. I have friends, we had a major in college called history of medicine, where it was literally like just literally looking at how medicine and has evolved over time and the historical implications of it. And they did like literature reviews and like research on that. It doesn't have to be bench work or your stereotypical research. Another thing that I would like to mention is to diversify your experiences. Something that I always mention is I had 2 activities. I was a volunteer cheer coach, and I also volunteered at a local like elementary, middle school, high school, kind of like providing like tutoring, SAT prep, mentoring, or whatever, in an underserved community in Boston. And both of those technically count as community service, not medical clinical. But to be strategic, the tutoring position, even though the mentoring position was a community service volunteer, it also qualifies as teaching, tutoring, teaching assistant. And because I didn't have any other teaching experiences on my resume, I chose to list that experience as teaching, tutoring, teaching assistant. So that way, when the admissions committees are scanning, your experiences, they're like, oh, she did community service. Oh, and she taught, and it just kind of adds to it. Now, I'm not saying you have to have teaching on your thing. I'm just saying that if you're in a situation where some of your experiences have overlapping categories and you only can pick one. So maybe if you have an experience where you could pick one or the other, maybe go for the one that you don't already have recognized on your application. And I'm gonna check the chat. I have done a lot of volunteering, and my leadership is within that. Do I list them separately? So that's a really good question. And something I do want to point out is for each experience, you're allowed to list like 4 subcategories. So maybe you were in a club, and for 1 year you were the VP, 1 year you were the secretary, and 1 year you were the president. Or maybe just overall, and I'm gonna show you a specific example. There's different ways that you could kind of finagle your application. Some people like to group everything. Like maybe you did lots of research, but you felt like all your research experience was like short, not as like in-depth research. Okay, maybe you might find a way to kind of like bundle it all together under just one research category to kind of like beef it up a little bit. It's really, there is some flexibility and creativity with how you do this.
Yeah, and one thing I'll jump in there and just kind of talk about as well is you don't want to just think about the experiences section of your application as like independent activities. Like at the end of the day, you still want to make sure, right, that you're telling a story. This entire application, from your personal statement to the letters of recommendation to your activities, need to tell a story to the admissions committee about who you are. And I always emphasize the thing for me that is just the most important when you're putting together these applications is, who are you? Like, don't just give me a random thing like, oh, I've tutored. Okay, that's nice. Like, a lot of people have tutored, but why is that important to you? Why is that specific to you as a person, and the differences and experiences that you are going to bring to a medical school and as a future physician? So with all of these things, like regardless of what the actual activity is, so whether it's art, like for me in college, I actually did hair and makeup for theater throughout the time I was in college. And I talked about that a lot because I'm a creative person, and I just wanted the admissions committee to know that, yes, I'm smart, I'm able to like be a leader, I do all these great things, but I also can like just do things for fun. Because at the end of the day, when the admissions committee is creating a class, they're actually looking for people who will gel together, people who are interesting. Like, they don't want to just have like a bunch of boring people in the school. So remember, use these experiences as an opportunity to share like the super cool, unique, funky things that you do. You might not think it's significant, but like that might be the one thing that everyone wants to talk about. So just remember that, and think again of the whole story and not just each individual activity that you mentioned in the application.
Yes. So I see some questions about future experiences. Yes, I did this. Basically, and you're going to see an exact screenshot of what it looks like from the medical admissions committee side in just 2 slides. But yes, I applied. I knew I purposefully chose a scribe position because I knew that the position would kind of help me boost some of my like lack of shadowing hours. And so I knew I needed a lot more clinical experience. What I did was I put this, you can put the start and end dates. And I kind of averaged it. I said, I'm working about like 36 to 40 hours a week times this many weeks. And that's how I did my total hours for that. So you are able to put your future experiences. I think it is a little bit harder though. I think the gray area is when you're going to start. Now, if this is going to be a future experience that you're going to start in January, then like, I don't know. But if it's something that maybe you're going to start in the fall, like for me, I submitted my applications in June. I was comfortable putting my scribe position, even though I didn't start it till August because I was in Haiti finishing up some other work I was doing. I was comfortable putting it because I knew that by the time that the people like were reading my application, I would already be at my job. So just kind of think about that. Chima asked, she babysat a lot for her siblings and it's been a huge part of your life for 5 years.
I can answer that one. I think one of the things that it's important to think about, again, like, because I think it goes back to what I was talking about before about your story and what is important to you and what's unique about you. So for you, like you're mentioning to us, like it's been such a huge part of your life, like in that roughly 100 to 200 word space, tell the admissions committee that. Tell them why it was so important for you to be able to spend that time babysitting your siblings. I think whenever you're thinking about all of these different opportunities to talk about the experiences, it's really like showing your heart, showing who you are. So I think that's absolutely like a great opportunity for you to be able to show that like you are able to care about people. And you also in the back of your mind want to think about, how do these skills translate to you being a future doctor? You don't necessarily have to write like, oh, I'm caring and I can care for future patients. But like, that's what the person on the admissions committee side is going to interpret. Like, wow, you're able to really like go above and beyond for these people that you care about. And hopefully you would treat your patients the same way. So definitely you can write about that, whether it was paid or unpaid. It was integral to you, and that's what you want to share.
Exactly. Martha, I'm going to answer your question. She asked, how should the writing style be different? I'm actually going to answer that now. Let's go on to the next slide. So here is actually an example. So this is a real example. I actually found this example from the internet, but I picked it because I actually work in this department. So if anyone goes to UCLA, I know there was a few people that have reached out to me. So this person is what's called a PLF, like a peer leadership fellow, and they were a life science supervisor. This student works twice a week for 2 hours. They mentor students and they teach workshops and do teaching sessions. And they were promoted at some point, to become the life science supervisor. So maybe in the comment box, if you guys want, or just in your heads, just think about if this was you and if this was an experience on your resume, how would you word this, or what would you say, or how do you think you would describe this? Would just give you a few seconds to look. Oh, Natalie, hey, UCLA. Yeah, AAP, woo. It's a department at UCLA, yay. If you were in AAP, yay. Okay, so this is the example. Yay, AAP love. Okay, great. And you guys are actually about to learn what AAP is through this example. So this is the example of this student, okay? And now let's look at what this student actually wrote for their experience description. I lead discussions in introductory cell and molecular biology for about 25 UCLA students biweekly. First and foremost, they explain, I lead discussions. They didn't say, I am a leader because I organize. No, when you have to name yourself, like, delete. Like, if you find yourself saying, like, I am a leader because I am smart because I am humble because, no, when you have to like name what you are because you're writing it wrong. You need to show, not tell. This person led a discussion in introductory cell and molecular biology for about 25 UCLA students biweekly. This is great. They quantified it. If you are able to put numbers, this is just a general life resume skill. Quantify your resumes. If you can show how many people you worked with, if you mentored, like for my cheerleading team, it was a team of 12 students. I put that so they know it's not just I was just coaching, one girl on the sideline whenever I felt like it. Like, no, I had a real team that, I was responsible for like leading and teaching them cheerleading and gymnastics and stuff. They also put they put a little bit of context bi-weekly. So if someone were to look at the total hours, they can kind of say, okay, those hours kind of make sense. Okay. I also serve as a peer mentor for students from low income, first generation, or underrepresented minority backgrounds. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, AAP, the Academic Advancement Program at UCLA, it's a really unique cohort that basically provides support for students, first gen and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to just ensure that students that may not necessarily have that support of like having a family member who went to college or whatever it may be, that they know that they have a place and a home to basically that they can go to for career advice and everything. And that's actually where I work now. I'm a pre-med advisor for the 6,000 UCLA students that are in AAP now, which is crazy because that's a lot of students. But look at this. They could have easily said, I am also an AAP peer mentor. No one knows what AAP is, even though he put here the organization name. But instead of just saying I'm an AAP mentor, he described what AAP was. Low income, first generation, underrepresented minority students make up that cohort. In June 2018, the department recognized me as the PLF of the month for outstanding student evaluations. In May 2018, I was promoted to supervisor of life sciences discipline, where I evaluate current PLFs, hire and develop new PLFs, and act as a liaison between the administration and PLFs. I learned to effectively communicate complex concepts, gain an appreciation for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and leverage my experience to constructively develop other PLFs. Wow, this is excellent. This person, I'm reading this and I'm like, wow, they have empathy. They are able to put themselves in other people's scenarios. The fact that they're able to manage their peers says a lot. The fact that they're able to teach their peers, it must take a lot for, when you're struggling as a student, for a student to come up to you for help, and then for you to be nominated as the most valuable helper, and you helped all the other students the most. Like, the way this person wrote this essay, I'm like, yes, check plus. And see how they like showed the story. They didn't say, I'm a leader because, or I won this award because I'm so great. Like, it's written in a way that they were able to express their accomplishments, but as a reader, I'm reading between the lines, and now I'm extrapolating, like, this person's empathetic, this person understands, they probably understand social determinants of health, they probably understand, like, you know, how, like, education and, like, socioeconomic status plays a factor in healthcare. And I think, you know, if I'm an admissions committee, like, say I'm, you know, in an urban underserved area, and that's where my medical school is based, I'm like, you know what, I trust that this person will be able to handle the patient population that I'm working, that we have, because they have demonstrated this level of leadership. So, like, that's kind of the way that you want to word this. And you don't want to put bullet points, because this is all going to be unformatted text. So sometimes students are like, can I just put bullets? No, you don't want to just put bullets, because there are no bullets. If it looks like bullets to you, people are like, I'll just put dashes. It's literally going to get compiled into just one chunk paragraph and get sent to admissions offices like that. And that's not a good look either. So this is just a prime example, and I hope this answered your question. Who was it? Oh, Martha, about just kind of the writing style. And with your personal statement, it's the same thing. You want to show, not tell. Like, the best personal statements that I've read are the ones where I read the story and I myself am like, wow, this is an amazing person. Not like, oh, they told me they were amazing. It's like, I can only think of positive things of them based off of what they had to say about themselves and their experience. So
a couple of things I wanted to just add on to that, just like tactically, because as you're working through this, a couple of things. So in the experience's name, what this writer wrote was they wrote out peer leader learning facilitator, PLF. So yeah, right there, with the fact that they used the abbreviation in the title, freed them up for so much space in the actual description. So just like think of places like that where you can save yourself some characters, because it is a limited amount of space. You're only going to have about 100 to 200 words to kind of write all of this out. So instead of them saying peer learning facilitator every single time in the description, they described the acronym above, and then they could do that below. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing to look at as well is with the dates, where they have like 2017 to 2018 and then 2018 to 2019. So what they did was they combined the experience's name to say peer learning facilitator and life sciences supervisor. But there's an alternative way that you can do that, is you can list out for each of those years. Like, let's say the first year they did the peer learning facilitator, and then the second year is when they did the life sciences supervisor. An alternate option is that you can separate it out to like list out the dates to correlate with when you did that particular like title. So that's just like some of the like strategic things to think about with this.
Yeah, thank you. All right, let's move on to the next section. I know do we need a break? Like, how are we feeling? Like, do we want to like power through? Are we like thumbs up? Oh, you're welcome, Martha. Yes, it's like it's similar to a professional resume. Similar mindsets. Oh, another thing in terms of resumes, use action words. Literally Google resume action words. I don't want to see any of you guys using basic verbs in your resume. You led, you empowered, you initiated, you jump-started initiatives. Use words that have weight, not just like, I volunteered. Okay, you volunteered doing what? Like,
yeah. I think two things. So Kasara, is it Sarah? Maybe Kasara, sorry, I can't tell where the name ends and begins. But you asked a question about, will this be recorded and sent for the future reference? So it is being recorded, and what we're working on just kind of finalizing is how we plan to share it in the future. So we don't have that finalized just as yet, but in some way, some form or fashion, we are going to share this going forward. We just have to kind of figure that out amongst ourselves. But I think one other thing, so you guys, no one's saying that they need a break, but I don't know. I think maybe we could do like another, like a song, if anyone has like song requests, we can maybe do one little jam session of a song and then come back.
Oh, okay. Just bookmark resume action words. Yeah, just literally type it into Google. People have pre-made these lists. I use them if I were to come up with my own verbs for resumes, I would sound real basic, okay? I need synonyms, okay? Look up synonyms, like get a thesaurus or use Google. Okay,
Yep.
and Jamie has just clarified her question. She said for sensitivity of the course input, I meant the course title. Okay, so going back to the coursework, Jamie was asking about how sensitive, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jamie, how sensitive are they about the course titles? So AMCAS understands that there won't be enough space to some of these courses are like the history of urban architecture through the Renaissance and beyond, identifying in time and beyond. And it's like, all right, you have like a paragraph for your course title. What needs to be there is like the course identifier. So like for us, it would be like LS1A, PSY for psychology 203B, like whatever that like course code is, that must be there. If the actual course name does not fit in the space given, you are allowed to kind of condense the actual title of the course, but just make sure that like management 335B or public health 32C, just make sure that all of that is included. Oh, I saved you money on an extra transcript. Hey, I'm glad. It's all about saving the coins. All right, so let's power through. If at any point anyone wants a break, just drop in the chat and be like, JK, or even right now, if anyone, I know we asked before, I don't see anyone said anything, so a break would be cool. Awesome, great. So why don't we take a little bit of a break? It is 1:33 PST time for you East Coasters. I guess it's 4:33. Let's come back, let's say in 5 minutes. Is that a solid amount of time? It's like one song length.
Yeah.
You guys can stay signed in. If you do end up closing your computers or closing your devices, and you just click the link and input the password, and then we'll let you back into the waiting room. So we will be back at, I guess, let's say 1:39, 1:38. I don't know.
Or we could just say 40.
Oh
We could
yeah,
just say 140, 440.
1:40 PST, 4:40 EST. And then if I'll still be here, so if anyone has specific questions, you're welcome to stay and type them in the chat if there's things that you want to recap, but I'll be here.
Trisha, I have a song request. Can we play Work by Rihanna?
Okay.
We are putting in work.
Okay. All right, let's get this Spotify. Work. Okay.
Hey, yo. So Rihanna is my countrywoman. Like, I stand her. I am in the Navy all day, every day. Question, I can just answer this in the meanwhile. Like, when you're thinking about prioritizing experiences, it all goes back to like, who are you? What is the story that you're trying to share with the admissions committee? So like, you can definitely do things in undergrad, but also if you've had a life beyond undergrad, share that too. You can do a mix of the two, but at the end of the day, it's like, what are the things about yourself that you've learned, the character traits? For me, I always like to emphasize that I'm caring, I emphasize that I'm a leader, I emphasize that I like to get stuff done. And then just once you kind of pick, like, let's say it's 5 or so different key attributes about yourself, then just make sure that the experiences you're sharing relate to that. And the timeline, obviously, like, especially if you've taken like 5-10 years out after college, they're going to want to know a little bit more about like the recent stuff than they care about like your college experience, but definitely you can talk about college too.
Yes. I had a question that was sent to me just about like, let's see, about your application. If you feel like maybe you don't have like a unique activity, like you don't need to have like you don't need to cure cancer. You don't need to be on an Olympic sports team. You could be a regular schmegular girl from wherever. It's not about, it's less about trying to do things that you think make you look good, but like, do you demonstrate passion? Are you dedicated to your community? The things that you say, if you say in your personal statement that you care about global health, did you do global health? And if you didn't, maybe explain in your personal statement why you're passionate about global health and how you're hoping your medical school will open up doors for you to do so. Use your experiences section. It should complement your personal statement. So if you say like, you know, you're passionate about working with underserved communities, is there any experiences that you have done, whether it's volunteering or something paid, where you had an opportunity to work with the communities? But by all means, like, you know, there are always going to be the people who are, you know, all whatever NCAA champions and won the Super Bowl and found some research marker and did something really, really amazing, but don't feel like you need to have these like super crazy accomplishments. Be confident in your experiences. And another thing is, you can also talk about in your personal statement, which we'll get to in a little bit, but you can also talk about what you plan on doing and saying like, you know, you know, as someone who didn't have a lot of research available at their school, like kind of explaining how you want to pursue a career in research and how you're excited to potentially open up those doors in medicine or something like that. So it's not detrimental to your application if you feel like you don't have something that makes you unique. You don't need to look for gimmicks or something to make you stand out. Just stay true to yourself and like just share your genuine experiences with what you did. I think I saw some question. Did I miss the way to see AMCAS's GPA before submission? Went to the bathroom. So the slide that I showed on GPA was this one. So this is kind of basically how it won't be organized like with these colors, but it'll basically be like this, that medical schools will see your science and your non-science and then your overall GPA for every single year. And then if you do undergraduate level coursework after you graduate from college, then that would go under the post-baccalaureate undergraduate section. So that would be a post-bac program that's undergraduate level, or even if you took extra courses at a college close to home during a gap year. And then after that, your cumulative undergraduate calculates all of that all together. And then graduate is if you did any master's courses or graduate level courses after you graduated college. If that explains the question. In terms of calculating, there is, once again, I think Dr. Tasha already sent the link, but I will also share it again at the end. There's actually like a specific guidebook that I would highly recommend when you're doing the coursework that you actually use the applicant guide, and they link to like the worksheet. It's like a worksheet that you fill out, and it actually like helps you go step by step to calculate like your hours and your things like that, so AMCAS can calculate your GPA appropriately. Julio says he's a full-time teacher taking prereqs part-time, a class per semester, and was told that one class per semester may be considered a red flag for med school. Is that true? What are your thoughts? So, I mean, it depends. It depends. If you know, say you have like, if you're coming from a background where it's like you have a lot of room to like improve your GPA and your grades, and maybe things didn't go as well as you had wanted to academically in college, taking one class at a time may, you know, I could see an admissions officer saying like, he's getting all A's now as a postgraduate, but you know, he hasn't really taken multiple classes at once. So that might be something that they look at. If you feel that might be something that they might consider, especially if you already have an academic history or some evidence of having academic difficulty. Because remember, in medical school, you're not learning things in silos. A lot of schools have combined curriculums. Like UCLA, we don't have a pharmacology or an anatomy block. Pharmacology and anatomy is threaded throughout the first 2 years of medical school. Our school also doesn't do individual organ systems like other schools do. They integrate, they integrate them. So they will do like, you learn heart, kidney, lungs all together because they're very similar and they kind of integrate with each other. So you're tested and have to learn all of those at once. So, you know, if you feel, I would say, if you can maybe have a time where you take 2 classes, that might be helpful. But at the end of the day, if this is what's working for you, I think it would be better for you to do extremely well taking 1 class at a time than for you to try to like double up or triple up to try to prove something and then you do mediocre, because that won't help you. If you think that you can maybe even like take an easier elective, like take maybe one of your prereqs, but then take like a lighter science, you know, elective that can go with that or complement that course. So tips for non-traditional students prioritizing experiences. Would we focus on undergrad, more recent events, or a mixture? I would say a mixture. It also depends how much time you're taking off. I mean, if you're taking time off, you do want to make sure that you have something current on your resume. So even if it means hitting up your pediatrician, family care provider, friend of a friend's mom who's a doctor, somebody to maybe even just get into the clinic and shadow. You don't want to, be applying 2 years out from undergrad and all your experiences come from undergrad, because then they're going to be like, what was she doing for the past 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, if you did things that you felt like were meaningful and significant to you, and they really shaped your decision and how you felt about wanting to become a physician, by all means include those. But for a gap year, it is expected to have like experiences, and it doesn't have to be like crazy research or anything. Like volunteer at a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen or a free clinic. Like do something that just shows like that you have sustained an interest and a commitment to becoming a doctor, even though you've taken time. How bad does a speeding ticket look?
I wanted to just jump in. So there was one question from a while back that we haven't gotten to, but then also we are going to have a whole section at the end for Q&A, because I want to just make sure that we can like get through all of the like content in case people need to drop off. But we'll do the Q&A at the end so we can like finish that a little bit later. But just so this one question doesn't get lost, because it was from a little while back. Someone was asking about the dual degree programs, and I think it's like fitting. So Trisha and I were dual degree docs. We're both MD MBAs.
Bye. He clearly doesn't know how to act. I'll be right back.
Trisha and I are both MD MBAs, and actually for both of our programs, we didn't have to apply to them at the beginning of med school. So for Penn and also for UCLA, you apply for the MBA portion during your third year of medical school. But to your question about applying in advance, I think it really is going to be up to you to reach out to the program directors at the schools that you're interested in, because each school is going to do that differently. And the people to think about are in the admissions committee, whether or not they have someone specific to the dual degree programs, or you might just need to find an admissions person at the MD or the med school, then also find the admissions person at the other schools, so whether that's public health, law school, whatever, business school, whichever one you're looking at, and then get that information there so that you do know if you need to apply in advance. But more often than not, at least that I've seen, a lot of the programs actually you apply after the fact, and you don't have to apply at the beginning to get into the dual degree programs.
Yes. I see someone also asked about diversity. I am very impressed by Ohio State. I don't go there. I did not apply there, but I can say like, on social media, they have had, out of every medical school that I have seen, they have been very intentional about their commitment to increasing the amount of brown and Black people in medicine.
Yeah.
Like it's their staff, like their EDI team, their deans of equity, diversity and inclusion are on it. There's this one doctor that was like leading it. I think he recently left, but he was kind of like the pioneering figure of just like they are like, from what I can see from the outside looking in, they put their money where their mouth is when it comes to supporting medical students. Another thing
on social media, Dr. Capers, Dr. Quinn Capers, especially on Twitter, look him up. Like he's just honestly just like super motivational. And like the whole program similarly, like I'm like, yo, Ohio State, they're doing the thing. And the thing that I thought about is he had posted this article that basically listed all of the top 10 medical schools that are the top 10 medical schools for graduating the most number of Black and brown doctors. So I would look that up. I don't remember the name of it. I can maybe try to Google it and find the link and drop it for you guys. But basically that was a list that did not include HBCUs, obviously, because the HBCUs would win, but like not HBCUs that graduate the most Black and brown doctors. And they were obviously on the list.
Quinn Capers, the fourth, I think he is.
Yep.
Like, if I were applying right now, I want nothing to do with the Midwest. There is nothing for me in Ohio, but I would actually submit an application to go there. And if I wasn't at a point in my life where I like LA and I kind of want to stay here, I would consider going there just for that. But Yeah. But I like LA. I want to stay in the sunshine. And then oh, Dr. Capers is great. Yay. Other school recommendations. I'm trying to think. I have a friend at UNC and she just has only positive things to say. The one dean that I know that a lot of their students respected, I think actually left. And he really looked out for their SNMA and everything like that. But it seems like UNC, although they're not as favorable to like out-of-state students. I'm trying to think. Honestly, Ohio State, I guess I'll put a plug for Drew. So I'm in the Drew UCLA program. We focus on urban underserved. So it's basically UCLA cohort is like 180 students. And then about 28 of us are also enrolled at Drew while at UCLA. And okay, so for instance, before this, I was getting ready for this presentation with Natasha, and my dean at Drew calls me on my cell phone. And I was like, hold on, Tasha, let me pick up. Dr. Kalmez is calling me. I pick up and she goes, hey, we organize a special panel where we have some of our recent graduates who are currently residents. We have them on a Zoom call, and she's like, I noticed you're not logged in. Are you getting the emails? Because I'm on a leave of absence because I'm doing my master's. She's like, are you getting the emails? And I was like, yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. Sometimes I get left off of emails because I'm like technically not in the medical school right now. I'm in my master's program. And she was like, all right, well, can you sign on? Because this is going to be really helpful. And I was like, oh man, I'm like working on something right now. I might try to get on later. And she was like, all right, I'll make sure they record it for you. Like, what? Like the fact that my dean called because she noticed that my little old name was missing from just the little Zoom icons. Like to me, that just says so much. Like she'll text you out of the blue. Like, yeah, if you are going to consider a school, if you're willing to come to California, look into Charles Drew, the Drew UCLA program.
And I'll give a plug for Penn too, because I actually like absolutely loved my experience at Penn. Our diversity efforts are like amazing. I think we graduate somewhere like between 20 to 30% of every class is underrepresented in medicine, which to me at an Ivy League university, like they are very purposeful about this as a part of their mission. So I like absolutely love that. And I think the thing I always want to encourage people to think about is do not ever rule yourself out from these institutions. I saw someone posted like, oh, they are taking like the extra amazing students. They are taking, yeah, you are an extra amazing student. It's not just about your grades. And I think the thing that's most important too that people forget about is like, you can go to med school for free. I think they don't talk about that enough. Like we often talk about all of the debt associated with medical school, but you can go to med school for free, okay? So for me, I feel completely blessed, humbled, and like so appreciative of the Lord, but I had a 100% full ride merit tuition scholarship to go to UPenn.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was because of the fact that this is an institution that they have money specifically set aside for people of color because they want to attract minority applicants, those who are underrepresented in medicine. They want us to be able to reach the patients who want to have physicians who look just like us. And it's not just Penn. A lot of these top private schools have that money. So look, like I'm telling you, do not rule yourself out. Let them tell you no. Do not be the one to say no to yourself.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I will say also too, I think UPenn just as an institution, like I know they are very similar in terms of their MBA recruitment. They are very intentional. I think it's kind of instilled in their culture. And I know we're going to get into like how to pick a medical school and culture. Like you'd be surprised culture. Like honestly, part of the reason why I want to stay in LA is like, also the weather's so great. Like I drove by the beach the other day. I was just like, I just want to drive through Malibu just for fun, you know, get some sun because it's Los Angeles. But like yes, I love LA, but another thing too is like the culture of medicine in different regions of the country is very, very different. And I just know from my work style and my personality, I have done quite well here for myself. And just knowing like what my personality, it's not that I can't do it if I were to go to one, like just like a little bit more like intense, like area of the country, like I'm looking at New York City. I mean, I'd love to go back home, but I'm just like, you know, I love the culture of medicine on the West Coast. It is very laid back. People care about your learning, but they don't care to like bring you down. We don't often have complaints about like residents and doctors abusing their medical students or attendings abusing their residents. I mean, things like that happen, but I'm just saying, like, like, don't sleep on the fit of the school as well. All right. Okay. Oh, and Michaela asked a question, yes, about online summer courses. So I'm going to post a link. Currently the slides are all up, but I will send a link just right at the end when we're doing Q&A about certain schools have released statements about what they are accepting and not. So all the California schools have created an allegiance that for right now, they will accept MCATs until October 2020. And if you do not have an MCAT on file when you apply, they don't want you to delay your application. They will still look at your application and they will offer secondaries to students without an MCAT, but just know that they will be looking at your MCAT as soon as it does come in to see if they're going to, like, interview you and accept you and all that stuff. But they will at least continue moving your application forward without an MCAT. So with that being said, and they also they understand pass fail and things like that. So if for those of you who are doing online courses, this is something that the whole country is going through, and unfortunately it is up to each individual school how they want to handle this situation. But I would say your best bet is to start looking up some of those schools. Some of them have already started publishing policies about what they're doing in regards to COVID. And if a school is already being very, like, proactive and public about, like, how they're handling this situation, then I think it would be fair to say that they understand that, like, everyone who's taking online classes isn't applying this year to medical school. Maybe some things you can do is, like, take, maybe a few extra, like, science electives, maybe just if you're not a science major, just to show, like, okay, yeah, I know I did these classes online, but I can, thrive in an academic setting in person too, if that's something that you're really concerned about. France, thank you so much. And Christy, I am, let's see, you're in Canada. I have a lot of family there. Yes, let us know if you have specific questions, Christy, about being an international applicant. And I will always be the first one. If someone asks me something and I am not sure, I will always be happy to say, like, I am not sure, but I will look that up for you. So if it means, texting my dean, who texts me on the regular and calls me clearly to tell me to log on to Zoom calls because she thinks it'll be helpful. If I don't have the information that you need, we're more than happy to kind of, get you plugged in or find the resource that can help you. Okay. Biggest question anxiety provoke admissions requirements for Canadians. Yes, MSAR. MSAR has a lot of information. I would take a look at MSAR, and we're going to get into that in just a second for those of you who do not know what MSAR is. So I'm just going to go down now. So let's get started because I know we're now approaching 2 hours and I want you guys to enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I know you East Coast people, it's getting close to dinner time and it's getting late. So let's just power through. This is essentially kind of like the last bulk of the session, and then the rest is just going to be really quick flyby. I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot, but I also just wanted to make sure that you guys have, like, all the information that you need. I know these, especially for those of you applying this year, like, it's literally opening in 5 days. So let me just open up my notes real quick. Okay, perfect. Letters recommendations. There's 3 types of letters. There are committee letters, letter packets, and individual letters. Committee letter means that your school or institution, some post-bac programs do this, some master's programs do this. They actually create, they have a pre-health committee, or your pre-health advisor will represent how your school views you. They take other letters of recommendation that you have submitted to them, and they basically take all the good chunks and they turn it into one big, like, super letter. Sometimes what they do, they even, like, staple or attach the individual letters behind them, but usually when schools receive this, they kind of just look at the cover letter. A letter packet is just when all the letters are just assembled, but it doesn't have that like evaluative letter from your committee. It might have like a cover letter, like a little brief one, but it does not go in depth as much as a committee letter would. And then individual letters, you can always just have people just get one-off letters and send them to AMCAS. And then we're gonna get into how exactly AMCAS will get your letters in a second. But one thing I wanna clarify is not every school does committee letters. The students I work with at UCLA, every time they always come up, they're like, can I get a committee letter? And I'm like, the institution literally doesn't do committee letters. I think part of it just has to do is that there's just so many undergraduate students there. I know in undergrad we had committee letters, but each dorm had a pre-med advisor to kind of, like, we had 12 dorms, and then each dorm had a separate like mini pre-med advisor group to kind of draft these letters for the students. So I think a lot of times, like, whether or not a school offers committee letters just has to do with just like the infrastructure and organization of the school, and do they actually have the capacity, because they'll do you a disservice if they don't know you, and they'll do you a disservice if they write something generic. So if your school doesn't offer committee letters, it's not the end of the world. It's okay. People get into medical school without committee letters or letter packets. But with that being said, if your school offers them, you should take them. And I think sometimes people are like, I don't want my school to write it for whatever reason. I don't really understand why. Here you go, France. Yes. Would it hurt your app if you send individual letters? It does not hurt your app if you send individual letters. And it really depends on the situation. So for my situation, like I applied basically as a senior. It would be kind of like, why didn't she get a committee letter if everyone else coming from her institution has a committee letter? However, let's say I'm a few years out and it's been several years. I mean, our pre-med office will work with alumni and still get to know them, and they can always come back to campus. But let's say your school doesn't offer that, or you feel like they don't know you well enough, or you're just too far removed from undergrad, then yeah, sending individual letters, or maybe you rather get the committee letter from your post-bac program, that's okay. Will it hurt your app if you send individual letters? It does not hurt your app if you send individual letters. Every single person who applies from UCLA sends individual letters because they do not have any committee letter or letter packet. It's only just people will sometimes raise an eyebrow if they know that your school tends to do these committee letters and you opted out of it. Don't be surprised if someone asks you, why did you opt out? Have a good reason. Saying like, I don't like those people is probably not sufficient. But if you were to say like, oh, I took 5 years off, I moved across the country, I haven't been connected to the pre-med office, and I just felt like they wouldn't best represent me since I've like grown and matured over the past 5 years. You can also send extra letters. So in AMCAS, you can designate 10 letters. Now, that does not mean you send 10 letters, because no medical school wants 10 letters from you, okay? They do not want 10 letters from you. But let's say you have, let's say there's one school that you're applying to and they just have a really heavy like research focus or something. And maybe you really want your PI to really advocate for you. So on top of the committee letter, you send an individual letter, or maybe your employer just offers to write you something. It won't hurt. And you're using 2 undergraduate letters and a grad letter. No, that's perfect. It's great, especially for those of you that are taking time off, if you can get letters from people in your updated phase of life. So if you're more than like 2 years out, you might want to look to have like a boss or like a teacher or something get your letter. And something that I wish people told students is to get your letters early, which leads me to talking about letter writing services. So AMCAS has a letter service called the AMCAS Letter Writing Service. It is free, and there are downsides to it though. So what happens is you put in the person who agreed to write your letter of recommendation, then they have a letter of recommendation ID, and you give them a cover letter similar to the same cover letter that you submit with your transcript, and that just keeps your letters attached to your file because it has a special ID number and barcode and things like that. And your letter recommender will create an account. You have to give them your AMC ID, and then they have to like input all those things and then upload it to the AMCAS letter writing service. Another option, well, the downside of that is that those letters expire after a year. AMCAS does not hold letters. If you are in a position where you have professors, you have relationships with coaches, you have relationships with, a research mentor, whoever, ask them for a letter. Like I tell anyone that's a freshman, all these prereq courses, get to know them, start going to office hours early. And when you're done with the course, ask them for a letter and tell them like, hey, like I did really great in your course. I know that I'm not like applying to medical school this year, but because I did so well in your class and I just wanted you to be able to speak to my experience, like taking this class, would you be willing to write me a letter and have it so I can have it on file to use in a couple of years when I apply to medical school? The plus is Interfolio will hold your letters forever. The downside of Interfolio, it does cost about $50 to release the letters to AMCAS, but Interfolio is a good option for those of you that maybe aren't applying right away and there's people in your life that you want to hold your letters. The reason why you want to use a letter service to hold your letters is because you don't want to see your letters. There's going to be a checkbox, you guys have probably seen it before, that says, I waive my rights. Waive your rights. If you do not waive your rights to view the letter, me, assuming I'm the admissions committee, I'm gonna be like, wow, like, you know, Christy has these great glowing reviews, but she didn't waive her rights, which makes me wonder, did she screen out all the bad letters? So now these really positive letters don't hold that much weight because I don't know if she purposefully planted the positive ones and took out the negative ones. By waiving your rights, that's saying that you have blind trust in the people that you ask to ask you a letter of recommendation. Yes, Atasha. And if you are years out, you can take a class at a community college or even a local institution. If you're trying to repair your GPA, it usually is a little bit better if you take it at a four-year university, but community college courses do count as well. But yeah, you can take just like a one-off, just sign up for like a one-off like science class and just be involved, or maybe you were volunteering or shadowing or something, ask someone that you're involved in like some sort of extracurriculars after you graduated to write your letter. The only thing is with Interfolio, some people like it because it's a little bit easier. AMC or the AMCAS letter writing service requires your recommenders to like kind of have your AAMC ID. They have to upload it. I mean, it's not really that hard. It's just a little bit of extra steps. Whereas for Interfolio, they literally get an email and they click a link and they upload their letter and that's it. And then from there, you pay Interfolio to send it to AMCAS. Like I said, if you're applying this year, just go with the AMCAS letter writing service. It's free. But if you're an undergrad and you're not applying right away and you have strong relationships with people, I would encourage you to either get the letter now and have them hold on to it, hold it in Interfolio, or some schools actually do hold your letters for you. So that's something you can also ask your like career services, and they'll even hold your letters for you as an alumni. But once again, it's up to each institution to decide that. Okay. So let's talk about, so the next section of the medical school, oh, another thing about letters of evaluation is every letter doesn't have to go to every school. So say, I don't know, one of your mentors is like a former dean of a medical school that you're really into, you can ask them to write like a school specific letter, because your letters are going to say, dear admissions committee, dear medical school admissions committee. And if you, so they're going to be like pretty just overall acceptance in medical school. So if you want one or two letters that are specifically tailored to a specific program or a specific thing that you're applying for, you can get an additional letter sent to that one school and not all the others.
And Michaela, you can probably go to the next slide, but I'll just answer your question, Michaela, about the fact that your letters don't have to be from professors. Definitely, like if you have teaching assistants, teaching fellows who you're more closely in communication with regularly, and they have gotten to know you as a person, gotten to know you as a student, as a future doctor, that person definitely can write a letter. What I think would be helpful, and something that both Trisha and I have done, is that for that class, like definitely even just try to like meet the professor. If it's even like you set up like a one-time meeting so that they like know who you are, know your face, know your name, then you can always ask them to co-sign the letter. So you can have the graduate student or the teaching assistant write the letter, so it's going to be a stronger letter in terms of like them actually knowing you and being able to write about your strengths, but then you can have it co-signed by like the person who has the PhD or whatever behind their names, or if they're the person who's more well known. So that can just like help strengthen the letter a little bit, but you do not have to get it from a professor at all.
Yes. Okay, perfect. I was just responding. I got a private message in the chat, just sent a response. Yes, and another thing too, make it easy for your letter writers. There is actually a PDF. We're gonna wrap up and like send you guys like everything that we've mentioned and all these resources. We will follow up with an email. AMC actually creates a document for letter writers. It's 2 pages. On the front, it kind of just explains what are the expectations of like letter writers and what a good medical school letter writer touches on. And then the back actually talks about, it bullets like the traits that medical schools like to see in medical students. And so something that I like to do, something that I did was I basically emailed all my professors or the teaching assistants, and I was like, hey, I really enjoyed taking this class with you, blah, 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 blah. Like, if possible, I would love to know if you'd be willing to write me a strong letter of recommendation for medical school. I think you'd really be able to speak to my strengths, and like, and then I put something like, oh, like, you saw how well I did well in lab. Like, I think you'd really be able to speak to my academic strengths. So you'd be able to speak to whatever. And then if so, let me know. And I'm happy, like, we can meet in person. And then usually they meet me in person. And when I meet with them to talk about my thing, I usually give them a draft of my like personal statement. I give them a printout of my resume or CV. And then I also give them, at the time I was applying for a few like postgraduate fellowships and also medical school. So I also gave them like a little like 1-pager from the website of whatever fellowship I was applying for. Like, oh, and by the way, and here's some information. My school at the time, they actually wanted you to mail letters to our dean's office, and the dean's office would hold our letters. So I included a self-address and stamped envelope. All of this was packaged in a little folder. So when I met with them, I was like, oh, by the way, like, I'm sure you get tons of requests to write letters. So I just organize everything for you. In it, you can find my personal statement, my resume, and a little bit of tidbits just about the program that about the fellowship that I'm applying for, just so you have a little bit more context. If you guys are using this for letters of recommendation for medical school, you could say, oh, and I also attach a sheet provided by the AAMC that kind of just, I'm sure you're used to writing letters of recommendation for medical school, because you don't want to make them think that you think they're dumb, but just be like, in case you want like something to reference, like I have something available for you. Smile, you talk with them, talk about your goals, why you want to go to medical school, talk about your experience, recap, key, whatever. Then you follow up, because most people lose paper. I mostly did that just to like, tell them like, I'm on this, like, here, you have no reason to write me something generic because I did the work for you. And then I follow up with an email, and I just say like, thank you so much. If you need any more information from me, let me know. I also attached a folder that has the same documents that I had sent to you in paper in case you prefer a digital copy. I have, here's a digital copy in your email as well in case you would like to reference that instead. And every single person that has written me a letter of recommendation has told me that I made the process so easy for them. I gave thank you gifts. I bought everyone like these like little gourmet cupcakes. Tasha didn't give thank you gifts.
Absolutely not.
But at the very least, say thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I said thank you for sure. I sent an email like, thank you so much. I also followed up to let people know when I got into med school, like told them like how much I appreciated them. So definitely follow up. But I was not spending my money on them. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, so let's get into it. So after you get into letters about, and by the way, guys, keep in mind, these are literally all the sections of the AMCAS. Like on the left side of the screen, like I'm not like making up these topics. Like this is literally like med school section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, this is like the 7th section of the application. This is why these people give you 1 month ahead of time to like pre-populate some of your stuff, because it's like, it's a lot of clicking that you got to do.
It's
and a lot of like organizing. It's a lot. I told you, it's not just write an essay and mail it and send your transcripts and be done. No, these people are making you work. Like, Anyway, now we're at the fun part, getting into medical school. Factors to consider: location, cost, stats of the previous classes, public versus private. If there's a special focus, some schools focus on urban health, rural health, primary care, in-state versus out-of-state. That's important. If, you know, I got accepted to some private New York schools and I got accepted to some public New York schools, and the way that public tuition was set up, I was just like, yeah, there's like, I don't know if I could justify going to a private school. Specialty preferences. So this is something that people sometimes ask, like, does it matter where I go to medical school? At the end of the day, your MD is going to be your MD is going to be your MD. I will say people don't talk about this, and I'll be honest with you. Depending on your specialty, it does sometimes help to have certain schools behind your name. And it's not necessarily like the way medical schools are ranked is very different than how undergrads are ranked. Like undergrads are ranked, I actually don't even know how. It's like Ivy League, then like Stanford, Duke, Hopkins, and then, you know, I feel like the way medical schools are ranked are mostly based off of like research funding, but also they're also ranked, like different hospitals are known for different specialties. So you can have a hospital, like what is it? What's the hospital in Philly? I think it's Thomas Jefferson.
Will's Eye, you mean?
Yeah. So Thomas Jefferson isn't necessarily, like when you look at their overall ranking, they're like a middle of the tier, like just an average school. Great. If you get accepted there, great. It's a great school. I have friends that went there. They did great. They're doctors now. You know, they got what they needed. But when it comes to ophthalmology, they are like top 2, top 3, like regularly 1, 2, or 3 every single year. And so, and that makes a difference, because if you know you want to do something like dermatology, plastic surgery, ophthalmology, what are some of the other competitive things?
Like urology, plastics, like any of those.
Surgery, like there's certain subspecialties that aren't at every single program, first and foremost. So say you really want to do dermatology, you have experience in dermatology, you're set on it. Not every school has a dermatology program affiliated with it. And dermatology is one of those specialties where who your mentors are can make or break you, because people apply to all the residencies for dermatology, like literally every single one in the nation, and don't match. And it has nothing to do with the applicant, but it's just that it's so competitive. So if you go to a school with a strong dermatology program, that means you're able to have a dermatology mentor. That means that mentor is grooming you, like you're pushing out dermatology research. Most people don't get into dermatology without doing research these days. So you have a mentor that's pushing you to do research. On top of that, if you have a mentor that's that involved in the academic world of dermatology, they probably know, honestly, a lot of these people know all the program directors. So it's like, you know what? Dang, Tasha, you didn't get an interview from you. Let me call my homegirl. Hey, Dina, program director of USC Dermatology, why you overlook my student? Like literally, I kid you not, this is how some people get matches in residency. It is who you know. Like, and so it doesn't mean that you have to go to a top school, because like I said, at the end of the day, an MD is an MD is an MD. But just keep in mind that for certain like really competitive specialties, you definitely will have a leg up if you do go to a school that has that. With that being said, does that mean that like, you know, you are like, I'll use like, I don't know, my state school, like SUNY Downstate is by nowhere near as good of a state school as the UCs. Like the medical schools on the California, I think the public medical schools are way better than the ones in New York. Like even like UT Southwestern in Texas, I think that's public as well. Much higher rank than like a SUNY Downstate, SUNY Upstate. Does that mean if I go to one of those medical schools, I can never be a dermatologist? I can never be a urologist? No, but it just realize that like the students from other schools do have a little bit of an advantage in terms of their network, the fact that they have dermatology or urology rotations at their school. Whereas like,
I think one thing too, because I also want to make sure that we don't like scare you guys from thinking like, oh, you'll make the wrong choice depending on
Yeah.
which school you apply to. It's not that at all. Just because a lot of people, I don't know, like when I went to a med school, I had no clue what I was going to do. I literally was just like, the Lord will show me the way. Like that's literally how I went into med school.
I thought I knew. I didn't. I'm doing psychiatry, and it's crazy because I told myself I would not do psychiatry. So there's that.
Same. So I think the thing is just to recognize, and these are like down the road conversations, and we honestly hope to be a part of your medical journey when you're med students, like when you're going to residency down the road. But once you are a medical student and applying to residency, you can do away rotations. So if like you're interested in ophthalmology and your school doesn't have it, there you can apply to do a rotation at another program with an ophthalmology department. So don't worry that like you have to, like your chances are shot if you go to a place that doesn't have the specialty you're interested in.
Yeah, it's not. But I do think though that sometimes people don't like, I think sometimes people don't give like, at least for me, I like to know everything and then I can make the best decision for me. And I think sometimes like students don't realize like when they're weighing their pros and cons and like, or when they have multiple acceptances, like some of the other factors that they should consider. And I think that's something about medicines, like people are honestly not that transparent all the time. And I'm like, but these are little factors that matter. But like, yes, like Dr. Tasha was saying, like, no, this shouldn't be the end all be all. Still apply broadly, still have, reach, reach schools where you kind of meet the stats, and then safety schools where you're a little bit above the stats. But it's just something to think about. Other things to think about are family, region, diversity, prestige. Some people, it really matters where they go to medical school. Other people are like, I just want to go to medical school. Some people are like, I refuse to leave the West Coast. A lot of my classmates are like that. They think that California is God's greatest gift to earth. I mean, it's great, but it's not that great. I'm just kidding. But, there's a lot of things to consider. With that being said, apply broadly. Like Dr. Tasha was saying, don't say no before they say no. You never know what will happen. Most schools offer some sort of second look weekend, whether it's a formalized whole weekend with programming. Some schools just have like an intimate dinner, but they do have ways for you to come back. Fee assistance program. We'll talk about that in just a second. They do have ways for you to come back and actually weigh some of these other factors. So, I mean, I knew for me, there were certain places I just was not willing to apply. I have decided I will never be in Boston ever again. There is nothing there for me. If you guys see me living in Boston, it means I probably had a husband and he must have just bought me a really nice gift. Like I'm talking about like deposited $1 million into my bank account to have me move to. It's just not for me. It was great for the college experience and I don't want to go back. So I did not apply to any schools in Boston and I was okay with that. And so that was my regional preference. And I was like, I want to prioritize places that are warm, places that have more moderate climate. No, weather isn't the only thing, but it was important to me. And don't let people decide what's important to you and what's not. I had an advisor who was like, why do you keep talking about the weather? Because I was like, oh, well, this place like is more sunnier than that place. And he's like, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, yes, it does. When I'm studying for hours on end and it's dark and gray and gloomy, at least I can like have fake happiness because I'm getting vitamin D from the sun when I study at my desk in LA. So don't let people decide for you what is most important for you. Oh, Tosin, yeah, you went to undergrad 20 minutes outside of Boston and ran away. Yeah.
Boston's not it. Whenever people ask me about Boston, I'm like, I feel
the same way about San Francisco. I'm like, you could not pay me. It is like LA is expensive, but like SF is expensive for no reason. It's only expensive because all the tech companies are there. Like there's nothing of value or substance in San Francisco or the Bay Area for me. So I will not be applying to residency there. Okay. Really quick, so just to talk about the essay. So the personal statement is ultimately when we think of like our medical school essay, this is the essay. But as you guys have seen from this whole entire presentation, there are multiple like little mini essays that they kind of embed throughout this whole application that people don't really tell you about. We actually have like a workbook in place, the 5-day personal statement. It's a framework that we created to kind of get your gears turning. So if you're someone who's like, I have no idea what to write, I have no idea where to start, blah, 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 this will be a great way to kind of like kickstart you into starting to think about like over the course of 5 days, a framework that you can use to get your personal statement. In order, you can use your cell phones now to take, if you scan with your cell phone camera, it should have like a thing pop up, so you can just open the link and you could actually just put in your name and email and you will get this PDF for free to us. We're also doing a 5-day personal statement workshop. It was actually scheduled for this week. It is being pushed back, but still sign up the same way that you signed up for this webinar. We're doing it over the course of 5 days. It's just going to be a mini workshop, like every day, meet for about 30 minutes. We can power through and like start our drafts of our personal statements. And just really quick about the essays, just keep in mind that you're supposed to tell a story. You know, it is not supposed to be, the worst thing you can do is outline your resume. No, that's what your experiences section is for. This is not the place to brag about all your accomplishments. This is, why do you want to be a doctor? Why are you fit to be a doctor? What experiences have you gone through that make you want to be a doctor? You're trying to convince these people that you will be a great doctor. And I'm emphasizing that because sometimes people talk about their personal statements and they spend the first 3 paragraphs talking about like, oh, and my mom had a healthcare condition, and you know, like, and my dad had like diabetes and this influenced my life. And it's like, okay, you could have put your family's health conditions influence your life in 3 sentences. This essay is about you. It's not about your parents' experience. It's not about your siblings' experiences. Like, it doesn't mean that you can't touch on other things, but bring it back to you, and make it a cohesive story. And a great application for medical school will, the experiences that you have will also support the things that you're saying in your personal statement. So for me, I wrote in my personal statement, I was very passionate about global health. I wanted to work in underserved communities domestically and abroad. That was like literally my like one-liner. I want to work in underserved communities and improve healthcare discrepancies in underserved communities domestically and abroad. What did I do domestically? I, volunteered as a cheer coach in Dorchester at a failing high school. The school doesn't even exist now. Like, they literally had to shut down. I volunteered as a cheer coach for a failing high school because I realized, like, that these kids were given a disservice, that they didn't have a safe place to go after school. And by being their coach, I provided that for them. I, volunteered and like helped tutored at like, other schools that were like, had students from lower SES backgrounds who couldn't afford like SAT prep and all that stuff. So I provided that. What else? I did a lot of global health work. Like, I've done a lot of work in Haiti during my time in undergrad. I was a global health minor. So you see how like all those experiences, so when someone looks at my personal statement, they're like, huh, this girl says she wants to be a doctor to do global health. But then they look at my experiences and they're like, wow, this makes sense. Because I was able to use those experiences and show the evolution of how those experiences got me to wanting to do that with my life in the long term.
And I would say from my example, so I'll kind of like similarly kind of talk about the story that I told with my personal statement. So for me, my family and my background as being from the Caribbean is really central to who I identify as, and my faith is also very important to me. So I made sure to emphasize, like, for me, one of the stories I tell is that when I was 4 in church, my pastor during a church sermon prophesied over me as a 4-year-old and said that I would become a doctor. So I talked about that story and how that has always just like stayed with me. And then I also talked about the fact that what I really care about is changing a lot of the way that the system of healthcare is set up, and it's set up in a way that's not accessible to so many people. And as a leader, I wanted to be at the forefront of making some of those changes. So just like Trisha talked about how the experiences section then relates back to the personal statement. So in my experiences, literally everything, I was president of this, vice president of that, like leading all of these things, making change, changing organizational structures, because I'm showing the examples of how those things I've done are actually related to the things I'm saying I'm interested in related to medicine. Mm-hmm. And I also just kind of want to just talk about, because I'll be kind of leading the 5-day personal statement workshop. I am really passionate about you being able to share your story. Like, I want, and I say this all the time, I want you to write an essay where at the end of someone reading it, they're like, yo, this person is so dope. I need to meet them. Like, that is the mission. That is what I want to help you to be able to do. So with the 5-day personal statement workshop, it's going to be 5 different days, about 45 minutes worth of content to really help you to dig into creating the story that's going to make a statement that's unforgettable, because that is ultimately what you want your personal statement to be.
Mm-hmm.
And one quick other thing. So if you're not tech savvy, because I only literally just today learned how to like get the QR thing on my phone. So if you don't have the QR app on your phone, you can just go to our website, dualdegreedocs.com. It's on our homepage. You can go to the homepage, and you can download the workbook, which walks you through the 5-day steps. It kind of gives you the outline, but then we'll use that workbook as a guide to go into a little bit even more detail during the workshop.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that leaves us to the last section of the AMCAS, is the MCAT. You guys you need the MCAT. I'm sure this is nothing new. I just want to put this slide. Your AMCAS is automatically going to pull your MCAT score. Some resources, you have your traditional Kaplan courses. Sometimes people always ask me for more affordable resources. I have found Magoosh to be, so I've never used Magoosh for MCAT. And remember, I took my MCAT in 2013. Wow. I've never used Magoosh for MCAT, but I have used them for GRE and I have used them for GMAT. And I think something that I like about Magoosh is that they create their videos are very quick and to the point, and they give you tips and tricks. Like, they give you just the right amount of information in a very digestible way. Something I don't like about Magoosh is, personally, I felt like for the GRE and the GMAT that I don't know if I would say that the questions were exactly as well as the ones that came from the official GRE book. Father's calling, mute. Khan Academy, some of you might be familiar. They offer free videos via like YouTube. You can find them. A lot of students use that to, like, say you don't have the funds to take a course. A lot of students use Khan Academy to kind of like reinforce or explain concepts that they're kind of struggling with. Something I want to nail the head on. Whatever you use, maybe you're not a video person, maybe you're a book person. Maybe you're a book person, you're not a video person. Maybe you're an audio person and you just listen to the lectures. Maybe you're just a genius and you didn't even have to study for the MCAT. Question banks, do questions. And I made the mistake, and I am not the best standardized test taker. I am someone who I always feel like I need to know everything before I start questions, because I'm like, I don't want to waste the question. There will always be question banks to use, okay? There will always be questions, and these question banks usually have thousands of questions. So, like, sure, you might remember one, but realistically speaking, you're not going to remember all the answers to these questions. You see questions as a learning tool. Regularly, before you start, if you guys haven't started studying for the MCAT yet, take a baseline exam. How do you know what you're doing is working if you don't even know where you started? You literally are, it's like saying, all right, I'm in Los Angeles. I'm going to try to drive to see Tasha in Philly, but I'm not going to use a map. I'm just going to get on the road and hope I make it. Like, how do you set goals when you don't even know where you're starting from? Take a practice exam. I know it's stress-induced, it's anxiety-inducing. I know, especially if you've had like academic difficulty with your prereq courses, you're going to be really scared. Prepare yourself. Just be like, you know what? If I get a 0 on this test, it doesn't mean that I'm not capable. It just is highlighting the areas that I need to work on to improve to get to where I want to be. And try to switch your framework that way, because I think the most common thing I see with students about the MCAT is they don't want to take practice tests and they don't want to take questions. Keep in mind, for those of you taking the test this year, they are shortening the cost. They're shortening the time of the exam. It used to be, 7 hours and 30 minutes, and now it's 5 hours and 45 minutes. They claim that it's the same amount of questions and sections, but ultimately what they did was they removed the tutorial, they removed the breaks. If you have been studying for the MCAT and you haven't practiced without those additional breaks, I encourage you to take a timed exam under those conditions. There are so many factors that affect performance, and one of them is timing, and you want to know sooner than later if, not having a long break in the middle will affect your stamina. Okay. So be sure to practice the new timing. And my key tip for this is everyone will have something different. I remember when this isn't the MCAT, but when I was studying for my boards, I got so paralyzed by and this is step one. It's like the exam for medical school. Except you guys will have a pass fail step one. So the stress we experience from the test, you guys will not have. So blessings for you. But
Yeah.
for step one, there are so many resources that are available for step one. There's so many different review courses. And the worst part is like medical students have learned how to get stuff for free. So not only, whereas for pre-meds, it's kind of harder to get like these Kaplan courses and these things without actually paying for it. So it's like, all right, if you don't pay for it, it's like, all right, I guess I just won't have it. I can't afford it. It's too expensive or whatever. But the hard part about medical school is you have all of it. It's like having all the Kaplans, all the Princeton reviews, all the other stuff. And they have a whole bunch of other companies that exist just for medical education learning. And it's for free. And then what's going to happen is like, I was at a point where I was using my little resources. And then, I'd study with a friend and I'd see them using another book. And I'd be like, oh, what's that? And they'd be like, oh, you're not using this? Girl, you should have read this book. It has everything you need to know. And then now I'm doubting myself because I'm like, what am I missing? So then I go and I rechange my study plan so I can buy this book, so I can use this. No, all of like any quality MCAT resource will have all the same material. What they differ is in how they present the material. And right now stores are closed, but what I did was before I signed up for Kaplan, they use the same books in the books, like the same book, like the lesson books are the exact same ones that you buy. The only benefit you get with Kaplan is the structure, the practice questions, the instructor, and then like a fill in the blank workbook that you use as you take the class. So I went to the bookstore and I'm really particular. Like, this is going to sound weird, but I literally had to look, like, I needed the pictures to look a certain way. I was like, I don't want no outdated black and white stencil outline. Like, I want full color, like smooth, silky page, like Kaplan just worked for me. I've always used them for all my standardized exams. I also know for myself, I'm a big picture learner. I cannot memorize. I need to just fully understand things. And Kaplan, while some people criticize them for giving too much detail, for my learning style, it actually works better for me because I'm able to fully understand everything rather than just memorize. So basically stay in your lane. I'm not saying to not take advice or considerations from other people, but when you create your plan, stick with it. The only reason why you should be changing your study plan and your resources is if you see your score is not improving. And that's the importance of the baseline, is for you to say like, okay, the first time I got like a 498, what am I going to get the next time? If you're studying for 6 weeks and your score went down, something you're doing is off. And that means you need to, have the humility to say, okay, what I did for 6 weeks was not it. Back to the drawing board. How can I improve? But don't change up your study style just because you feel pressured by what other people are using. If what you're using and doing works for you, stick with it. And I just listed some question banks. A lot of people are using UWorld now. Blueprint MCAT also has some question banks that I know people use for their questions and practice exams. Also, for any standardized exam you take, do the practice questions that the company gives you. Okay?
Yeah.
Do not sit for the MCAT without taking at least one full-length official MCAT exam. Like, that is going to be your best predictor of how you're going to do. And that is going to give you the most realistic assessment of what the test is going to be like. Kaplan, they have a team of people to guess and to try to simulate as much as possible. Princeton Review does the same, but they are not the double AMC. They are not writing these questions. So the MCAT toolkit is $238. It has a bunch of practice tests, like practice problems and things like that. And I do think it is worthwhile. With that being said, to our last area is the cost of applying to medical school. Y'all, this is not cheap. I saw you guys were talking a little bit in the chat about applying to medical school and what those costs are looking like. MCAT, $320. AMCAS, just to apply to one school, it's like your application fee is $170. 19 schools, each school after that is $41. I tell students the fee assistance program gives students who qualify 20 schools to apply to for free, which means if the AAMC is offering this benefit to students who couldn't otherwise pay for it, maybe they pick 20 for a reason. And I always tell people, if the people who moderate this whole situation think that applicants should get 20 schools, then you should apply to 20 schools. I mean, some people apply to less, some people have higher risk tolerance. I applied to like 35 because I was like, I just need to get in somewhere. I'm probably going to do the same thing for residency, even though there's literally only 5 programs I want to go to. Because I'm just kind of
I think I applied to like 25 or so schools.
Yeah, I was excessive, but I do everything extra. Secondaries on average are around $100 per school. Some are less, around 50, 75. If you're applying to 20, so assuming that you got a secondary from every school, that's $2,000 right there in secondaries. So right now, just to submit your applications, you're looking at $3,200. And that's a high estimate because not every school is $100 for the secondary, and you're not going to get a secondary back from every school. On top of that, when you're doing your interviews, aside from this whole like virtual COVID chaos that's going on, you have Ubers to and from the airport. Don't forget surge fees for traveling, Ubers to LAX from here, it's like $40 one way if I leave at the wrong time. Flight fees, gas if you're driving. Some of these interviews I went to in upstate New York, I was like, I'll just drive. I got caught in a snowstorm. I almost drove off a mountain in a snowstorm. And it costs a lot of money to be filling up my tank to be driving 8-9 hours. Hotels, you don't want to just show up the day of your interview. You want to get there at least the night before if you can afford to, get a good night's rest, prepare yourself. So that way you're not showing up fresh off the road, suit wrinkled because you showed up from the plane. No. Meals, you got to eat. These people, they might give you lunch. And if it's lunch,
maybe.
It might be, I've had for med school interviews, sometimes they bring you to the hospital cafeteria if they have a nice cafeteria and they want to show it off. Usually it's one of those little grab and go sandwich lunch things. That's not the only meal you're going to need for your interview. They might give a cheese or cracker. Exactly.
They might.
Cheese or cracker. You don't get cheese and cracker. And forget about meat. There's no salami or prosciutto or none of that. Professional attire. It is expensive to buy suits. Just off the top of my head, I have gotten really affordable suits from JCPenney. They have a line, it starts with W, like Wellingsworth or something. JCPenney is not my favorite store whatsoever, but their suits are relatively quality looking for a cheap price, and they always have formal wear, professional wear sales. I think I got a bunch of suits on clearance.
My go-to is Burlington Coat Factory. Actually, they have a ton, especially branding. Half my closet is Calvin Klein, and not because I got money, but because I get them on sale. So, and they're really good quality things that have lasted me for years. So if you're into Burlington, check them out too.
Yeah, Burlington Coat Factories. Occasionally TJ Maxx and stores like that will have suit sets. Those tend to go, it's sometimes harder at stores like that because they don't always do things in the pair, so you might find the jacket. Your suit jacket needs to match your bottoms. This is not the time to be doing hodgepodge, okay? You need to buy a proper fitted suit. Men, get your suit, go to the dry cleaner, okay? And they will just sew the little, do not have your pant legs dragging. Girls,
I have a story. Okay, so I don't know who I thought I was, but for my first ever interview, I interviewed at Brown, and I was like, I need to let them know I'm a fashionista. Okay, so I showed up to my interview in a teal blue blazer, a floral top with this high-waisted skirt and boots. When I tell you my outfit was all over the place because it having to walk in this long pencil skirt with the boots and my jacket, it was just team too much. And I was that's just a random aside. Have it simple. You can still be have your flair. So I then would wear the teal blazer with a simple black and white dress later on, not trying to do the most. But this is not the time to let people know you're a fashionista. You can give a little bit of personality, but not too much.
So I am more conservative. I have seen people successfully get away with some flair. I've seen some guys with some great bow ties. I've seen one time for one school that I got waitlisted at, I'm convinced it was my eyeshadow. Because I got a new eyeshadow palette before my interview from Sephora, and I tried to do some makeup fashions, and I'm convinced that my eyeshadow alone kept me from getting accepted to the University of Rochester Medical School. Yeah, no, I tend to err on the side of more conservative. Medical school is a conservative field. It is honestly crusty, dusty, and a lot of old white men, to be completely honest. And I would say, err if you have to pick. I would say go conservative. If you want to do personality, maybe like a necklace or maybe like, but don't be showing up in, like this isn't the runway. Um,
Nope. I learned that the hard way. Don't do it.
Another thing that you're gonna have to spend money on is the MSAR. It's about $28 for 1 year. I think it's $36 for 2 years. It is the best resource to get information about schools. They release data like the percentiles that Atasha was saying. They also release, especially for certain people, California people, it is too competitive here. You have to apply out of state. Like you can have a 4.0 perfect GPA. When I did my interviews in California, I interviewed at USC, and the dean, she's so trifling because she was like, oh, who's here from UCLA? And I thought it was because it was like, oh, UCLA, USC rivalry. Oh, she's being petty and funny. Haha, cute. She was like, oh, interesting. She's like, yeah. She's like, so UCLA has the most number of pre-meds actually. And there's not enough seats in the state of California in medical schools for all the UCLA pre-meds that want to go to medical school. And I was like,
Wow.
bitch, right before our interview, this is what you're telling these people. You are so discouraging. But with that being said, is like, if you're applying out of state, not all schools are favorable to out of state applicants. So you want to look at the MSAR and say like, if this school has only taken 1% of out of staters in the past 10 years, and I have limited funds, this might not be it.
Yeah.
Some schools actually have rules like there's one school in Georgia, they only take Georgia applicants. North Carolina, I think it is, has a school that they only take North Carolina applicants. So do yourself a favor and get the MSAR so you can do this research so you're prepared and you know what to expect. They also give you like letter of recommendation requirements, what the specific prereq requirements are, because remember, it's technically up to the school to set all of these. And the last thing you would want is to apply and then realize your application was not considered because you did not actually read the school specific requirements. And lastly is MCAT prep. We all know that's expensive. So what do you do if you want to save money? First and foremost, you read our blog post, tips to save money on medical school application fees. Dr. Tasha already dropped the link in the chat, and you can also, if you're tech savvy, you can use the QR code I made and scan it with your phone. But this is the fee assistant program. If you are approved and apply, I made the mistake of not applying because I was like, oh, I'm not going to get approved. And like, honestly, looking back, I think I would have gotten approved. Washington is on lock for their residents, have to show high school proof. Yeah, so some of the schools like in the Pacific Northwest, because states like Minnesota, Wyoming, some of these like, well, Minnesota has medical school, but some of these like other random places in the country, I don't know, I'm not familiar with those areas. States that don't have medical schools, they have linkages with specific medical schools that they're considered in state. So Washington, I think, is one of those that they will actually consider, I think, like Montana residents and Wyoming residents and things like that. California is usually a tough state to get into, especially for the UCs, but I'm here. And I have a bunch of classmates that came from the East Coast, so it is possible. So if you do the fee assistance program, just really quick, there's certain income requirements that you have to make. You apply, and basically you get the MCAT bundle that I was telling you, all those the official practice exams and questions, you get that for free. The MSAR, the resource that I was telling you that you use to, this barcode. Okay, perfect. Awesome. You get reduced MCAT registration, so they drop the price from I think like $320 to $120. You can also, if you do suspect that you might need like test taking accommodations, you can actually get financial assistance or subsidized evaluations if you feel that you need some sort of evaluation, like psychoeducational evaluation, I think is what it's called, for extended time. You also get a waiver for up to 20 medical school submissions. applications. Keep in mind the dates. They always have these dates in terms of when your application is approved, when your benefits expire. So you can apply it to this program up to 5 times. So let's say you apply this year, you decide to put off your application and your benefits expire, you can apply 4 more times. The one thing I will tell you is that MCAT resource that they give you for free, you can only activate once, and it lasts for exactly 365 days. So if you get approved for fee assistant program, don't just start activating the MCAT bundle just because you want to see what it looks like if you don't actually plan on studying for the MCAT. Wait until you actually know you're going to use it so you can get the max value, because once your 365 days is up, they don't care, and they're going to be like, well, give us $270 to pay to reactivate. So just keep that in mind. But you can, so the MCAT bundle you can only get for free once, but if you, for whatever reason, you need to reapply to medical school, or you applied for fee assistance and you decide not to apply, you have up to 5 times to apply for the fee assistance program. And that is basically it. So this
one thing I wanted to add, sorry, just because I want you guys to know these numbers, because I think a lot of times people are afraid, or like they don't think they qualify and don't really actually recognize the numbers. So for a 2-person household, so for instance, let's say you have a single parent and you are an only child, the guideline is 300% of the poverty line is what qualifies. So like just as an example, so like the one that popped up most quickly was DC, and like 48 states, generally speaking. So that would be like a household average of about $51,000 for a 2-person household. If you're a 3-person household, it's $65,000 for the year. So that's like everyone's income in the household combined. For a 4-person household, it's $78,000. For a 5-person household, it's $92,000. So that number, I'm sharing that just because it actually might be a little bit higher than you would have anticipated. These like what you can, this is like the cap of how much money your family can make, and you still qualify for fee assistance. So make sure you like look up, and we actually will have at a later point either a session and or like a flyer with like a breakdown of the information, but just so that you have the details of whether or not you qualify, because you might without actually realizing it.
Yeah. And like, I had no reason not to apply for the fee assistance program. Honestly, I think I was probably just lazy. Like, the same reason why it's like, oh, I don't feel like applying for the scholarship because I have to write an essay. Just do it, because you don't know what you can qualify for. And look at these costs. You could possibly save $3,000, because a lot of schools, and the MSAR can verify this for each schools, if you qualify for fee assistance, a lot of schools will give you a waiver for your secondaries. And if you qualify for fee assistance, they're more likely to ensure that you have free housing during your interview. So either they don't usually put you up in a hotel, but they'll at least ensure that you have a student host. And that's something you should ask for anyway for all your interviews, because not only does it save you money, but I learned so much by staying with students. Like literally the second I walked into the house where I was staying for my Dartmouth interview, I was like, I'm not going to nobody's Dartmouth. I was like, it was my first med school interview. I was like, Jesus, I know I was praying for just one yes. I know I said I will go anywhere you send me, but what is it? New Hampshire? I was like, it is not it. This is, or is it Vermont? I don't know. One of those states. I was like, this is not for me. And it was literally based off of my experience living, like being in that house for 2 days with those people. Yes, I was humbled real quick. Not only was it cold, and I showed up in a little denim bomber, okay, and I froze myself, got sick after the interview, but like living with them just made me see the culture of the school. And of course things have changed, so take my experience with a grain of salt. But at the time I felt like it was like a house of 5 girls. They were super nice. I appreciated them letting me stay, but they were intense. Like they were like, one girl was standing eating an apple and she was like looking at her watch, and I was like, oh, are you going somewhere? She's like, I have exactly 5 minutes to eat dinner and I don't have time to eat a real meal. So apple is for dinner. And then an alarm went off and she's like, okay, gotta go upstairs, gotta study. And I was like, oh no, because like different schools have different cultures. It depends on the region. It also depends on what their grading system is like. If it's not a pass-fail school, like I think students tend to be a little bit more intense about their grade. It was just, and then when I visited the actual campus on interview day, like some of my concerns that I had experienced by being in this house with these girls were also confirmed by just interacting with students, and it was just not it. So like not only did I save money, but I got a lot of insight about the culture of the school that made me realize that sure, if it was the only place I got accepted, I would go, but I was really praying for something else because I don't think it would have been good for my like mental and emotional wellness for me to be in that kind of academic setting.
So
Okay.
I think with that, one of the things we're going to do some Q&A, but I want to just make sure that we like give you guys some information, just in case you don't have any more questions and you're going to just drop off in a moment. Just wanted to kind of share with you guys, kind of going back to what our mission is. So when Trisha and I started Dual Degree Docs, we really started it with the goal of wanting to connect with you guys just like this, how we've been kind of chit-chatting back and forth, interacting, getting to know you guys, trying to figure out what your goals are and helping you to secure the MD ultimately. And we want to make sure that we're providing as many free resources as possible to help you do that. That being said, we also recognize that some of you guys might want some more one-on-one time, might want some more assistance that's more specific to your specific circumstance. So in addition to a lot of the free resources that we're offering, we also have some services that we're providing as well. So the two main services that we're providing right now is we're working to help with personal statement coaching. So you can think of this in two ways. So we have our free workshop and we have our free ebook that you can download. Those definitely help you really to honestly be able to write the personal statement. And that's our goal. We want you to have a statement. We don't want to have any barriers to you being able to write a good statement. But if you're still uncertain and like really just want to have someone oversee the essay that you've written, from my perspective, I've been on the admissions committee. I know what admissions committee members are looking for and want to be able to help you specifically with that and really review your essay. We offer services for that. And then additionally, we love answering your questions. And I think the office hours and these different workshops are a great opportunity for us to be able to do that. But like, let's say you have some specific situations. So like Christy, for instance, you mentioned being from Canada and how you're going to be able to navigate having some different hurdles to overcome than some others in the group, or whether or not you have a specific background that you want to understand how you can best explain that in your application. We're here to help you with one-on-one advising as well. And that's another service that we offer. So just remembering that our goal honestly is to be able to help you for as much as we can. So we want to be able to provide you the free sources to allow you to thrive. But for those of you who want more help, we also want to be able to provide that as well. So you can check out this QR code or just go directly to the website we have listed there, courses.dualdegreedocs.com, and that's where you can find out more about the pricing, what the actual offerings are. And I see one of the questions is at one-time fee or per edit. So the fee that we have is for 2 rounds. So basically, we'll provide you with an initial edit. And honestly, we think that a lot of the information in our free guide will help you to create the strongest possible statement that will require less editing upfront. Or it's less editing on our end, because we don't want to do like the basic stuff. Like you can edit, like you have people who can help you with spell check and grammar. Like that's not what we're here to help you for, although we will help you with that too. We're more so to make sure that the story you're providing is on point. So we're going to do 2 rounds of that. So you'll send it to us. We'll give you tips and feedback. You'll edit, do another iteration, send it to us again. Then we'll give you another round of feedback, and that's all included in the price.
Yes. And I see Arlette, you posted a question about, are we doing med school interview? Yes. So that is something that is coming out soon. Right now, we're just focusing just on AMCAS and personal statement, because we know that with the applications getting ready, people are getting ready to possibly submit within the week. We want to focus more right now on just like what people need right now. But yes, as we get closer to throughout the rest of the process, we'll be providing like workshops and services for, your secondary essays. If you want just like one-on-one advising, if you want interview prep and other things, and we plan on releasing other like ebooks and like just little guides and workshops like this just to kind of help you along the way. Yeah. And so I guess, so with that being said, thank you guys so much. Of course, this is our website, dualdegreedocs.com. You can shoot us an email, find us on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Pinterest at the same website. And then if you have any questions, so this QR code actually will directly link you to the applicant, the AMCAS applicant guide that I was referencing. Dr. Tasha actually already dropped the link in the box, and that's the 84-page guide. It looks really dense, but like now that you guys have an exact understanding of the different sections, you can use that guide, you can use that book as a guide versus like reading it cover to cover. So I would recommend using that specifically for entering transcripts and grades and things like that, just because those are the mistakes in that area are usually where students get the most like not getting approved for verification. So I would definitely use the guide to follow closely to make sure you're checking off the right boxes and filling out that part. Yeah, and so if you guys have any other questions, feel free to input them into the chat. We're going to be here. I understand though that if you guys have to run and go, tell your friends. We believe, like, one thing that kept me sane during this like pre-med process was I didn't compete with my friends. I knew there was a chance that some of my friends would get in medical school and I didn't. And like, we do have friends that applied and like didn't get accepted for whatever reason and maybe had to reapply and other things. But at the end of the day, like, our friendships came first and we pushed each other to be our best selves. If you guys were on our office hours chat, we do a monthly Instagram live where it's just ask us any questions. It's literally pre-med office hours via IG Live. And I was talking about how me and my friends had something called Chocolate Scholars and Chocolate Knowledge, where we would literally just get together, reserve a room. It was on the Harvard student calendar, Chocolate Scholars from 8 p.m. to midnight. We would play music. We had what we call booty shaking study breaks. Like, honestly, they probably should have removed our room reserving privileges, to be completely honest. But we made it fun and we did it together. And at no point did we ever feel like we were competing with each other. We were just trying to all be our best selves. And so, you know, it makes the process so much easier if you have a friend and someone to support booty shaking study break. Yeah. So just keep that in mind. So feel free to share our resources with a friend or your classmates or pre-med clubs. The IG Lives are monthly. I mean, I'm still in medical school. I'm graduating next year. Tasha's in residency. So we can't commit to every first Saturday because unfortunately our schedules just don't allow us. I don't even know what I'm doing like every first Saturday. So, but we will do it once a month, probably on a weekend. And if you just follow us on Instagram or just, just check our newsletter that we'll send out every week, we'll give you like updates about those kinds of things. So, yeah.
One of the questions from before, I'm trying to find who asked it, but you asked about the experience of being a dual degree doc, and would love to actually talk about that. So both Trish and I happen to be MD MBAs, and I can tell a little bit about my story as an MD MBA. So in college, and this is like really like a lot of background about me. So in college, unfortunately, both of my parents were unemployed during that time, and it was a really difficult financial strain for my family. I think just like the thoughts of, are we going to have a house? Like all of that to me was so challenging to think about. So I didn't want to be an additional burden to my family. And I was basically finding every way possible to hustle in college. So I had Atasha's hair care. I had jobs. There were different studies that I would do. Like the business school had studies you can make money. I had part-time jobs. I was just anything possible to make money. And that for me was because I didn't want to be a burden to my family. And with that, I recognized how much I love the creating process of being able to take a skill that I have, take knowledge base, or provide a service to someone and do it in a way that they find value in it and that they're like willing to give me their money for. That to me was something that I was like, wow, like I like this and I'm good at it. So even when I was in undergrad, like I started participating in like finance related workshops. I was like, oh yeah, I'm really into business. Like I like the way that this works and I like the way my mind works, very different than science. And going into med school, I knew I wanted to do both. So that's actually a huge part of how I ended up coming to Penn, because I knew that Wharton was here at Penn. Penn as the med school was a really great program as well. So wanting to be able to be at a place where I could do both. And for me, I think thinking holistically, I actually honestly go back and forth. Like if I were to tell you right now exactly how I'm going to use the MD and MBA together, I'd be lying, to be quite honest, because I still kind of don't really know, but I had to like make something up for my applications, obviously. But like, I do know that I want to be able to be a clinician, but I don't want to do that all the time. It's really hard. If you follow me on Instagram, it's just my name, Atasha Jordan. Like, you know, right now I've been going through it. Like, I'm actually like exhausted on this call, have been having a ton of fun, but I'm exhausted. And it's hard work. Like, clinical medicine is really, really hard work. But I also know that on the business end, like, I want to create, like, I still want to have businesses. I have this opportunity with Trisha to do what I consider to be a beneficial business, meaning that we are providing services to the benefit of society. And that goes back to what I experienced in college of really just wanting to help people. So that's why for us, there's so much of what we're offering is free. Like, we just want you to be able to like get into med school, but then we know that some people will want extra help, and we want to make sure we can offer that as well. So going forward, it's like, I'll, in some way, some shape or form, I will be running a business. I will be treating patients, and that's how the MD and MBA come together for me. The exact details, I don't know yet, but I just know like that's kind of what my interests are, and that's what God is like really calling me and telling me in my heart that that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and for me, I actually thought I was going to have a career in research. I took a year off to do infectious disease research. I published research in Haiti, thought I was going to be the next Paul Farmer, and I was really discouraged when the research that I did was like really instrumental, like infectious disease research amongst HIV positive pregnant women. And I got really discouraged when my research mentor was like, all right, we're going to replicate this study in Peru. And I was like, why are we moving to Peru? We clearly found a need. Like, we need to fix it. And he was like, no, because he's driven by, you know, his research funding, and his publications is what get him paid. And he doesn't care to fix the problems. He just likes to identify them. And that made me realize, like, I want to be a problem solver. And then I started looking into like, what are people doing to solve problems in healthcare? And that's when I realized like a lot of the people that I admire or want to model my career after have MBAs. And I realized I think the MBA gives me a unique skill set. Myself, I'm really passionate. Like, I'm still passionate about global health. But I'm also passionate about like working with kids with neurodevelopmental disorders. Growing up with someone in my family with Down syndrome was just made me really sensitive to like people with special needs. And I realized like my uncle, you know, is able to thrive. He was able to thrive because he had people like my dad and siblings and family that supported him and like helped him be his best self, despite the fact that he wasn't, you know, I guess like normal or typically developing. And I thought back to some of my like experiences. I did autism research in undergrad, and I've always been close with the special needs community. And one thing that I constantly saw was like people who don't have the right advocates. The people with special needs who don't have the right advocates don't fare as well as people who do. And usually what is limiting the advocates is not that people don't want to help, but they just don't have the resources or the information to help. And so what I've just been focusing, like my business school capstone project was basically a business plan created to like create an app for families of kids with autism. And it just like, and to me, that's something impactful because, you know, medicine is hard, and I know I want to practice and I want to have like some parts of my life clinical, but like Atasha was saying, like it is difficult, and you see a lot of doctors like burning out. And so for me, it's like, for me to have longevity in this space, like what can I do to still contribute to healthcare and contribute to the causes that I care about, but in a way that also, you know I'm also protecting like my sanity and my peace, because, you know, I see some of my attendings, you know, and God bless them. Like, one of them is like, she had a neck surgeon, and she's like, I haven't seen my newborn daughter in like 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, that is not the life I want. You know, I think we do need people in medicine that are going to be on the front lines and willing to make that sacrifice. And even though I'm here, it's just, there's other things that I'm really passionate about. And the MBA has taught me, and I've learned that I can still have an impact, or an even greater impact, even without providing clinical care. But with that being said, providing clinical care is also important, because the people who only do the business stuff don't understand the clinical stuff, so they make dumb decisions too. So I think having this, like, being in this world where I'm like at the intersection, it gives me the potential to really like make a lot of changes in the future and stuff. But anyways, if there's any more questions, I know we went over time a little bit, but I hope this was helpful. as always, feel free to email us. You guys have our contact information. We're here. We're so happy you guys came. And we're just so excited for all of you. If after you guys want to just give us any feedback, what went well, what didn't go well, or you could just drop it in the comments, or submit it via the contact form on our website, or shoot it in our DMs, just so we know, like, we're constantly always trying to improve. So for us to improve, and we'll probably send like a little feedback survey that'll be anonymous, where you could put just a few remarks as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks for joining, Alicia. Thanks for joining, Lynn.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna pop off. I'll keep this open in case you guys are still having conversation. I lost my car keys, and the downside to living in Los Angeles is that it's tandem parking, which means your roommates park literally directly behind you, but I lost my car keys, so my roommate can't leave the house. So now I need to go find them. So
Oh, man.
yeah. All right, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.